welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. Thank you for joining me here. We are in a really interesting, fascinating, exciting point in the book where Socrates turns to Jesus and says, hey, look, buddy, maybe there is a different class of man that goes beyond both of us that we would be followers of. Not just that, but a class of man that would make all other ways of being or categories redundant. Or more dramatically in the text, dooms all other ways of being. What's the new way of being that Socrates said can emerge? That ends all other ones? And how do we become that kind of a person? If that's the next stage in evolution, or maybe the highest way of being that a human can be, how do we be like that ourselves? Cracking my back. How do we do it? That's the question we have. We have been wondering about what that state of being might be, what might be like. Now, hang on a second. So we've been wondering about what that category of man would be, and we've been building a model to make sense of everything in the text so far, and we have just made a leap from that model of what has to exist in reality for our thinking, for understanding, and a leap from that to how that would play out in time. How does that cause every physical moment? How does it cause our thoughts? And therefore, by linking it to every moment in time, we can ask the question, how do we participate in the higher dimensions of reality ourselves? How do we connect with the source? Self. How do you know yourself? That's the big question. Know thyself. Now, also, we have been seeing that this idea of putting all of the pieces together into a whole is the creating of a model of, well, everything, but understanding. What are the principles of understanding? Why is understanding good? In other words, what does understanding have to do with goodness? Why are the people who love understanding and function through understanding, why are they better? Why do they do better things than people who relate to the world and themselves and others through belief? Why is that? What's the relationship between understanding and goodness? What's the relationship between understanding and benefit? By the way, those people who seem to love understanding and engage with the world through understanding, why do they seem more beautiful than everyone else? What does understanding have to do with beauty? By the way, what is understanding? What's the parts of understanding? What do you use to understand something? What are the building blocks of understanding? Whole, part, same, different. So excellence, beauty, benefit, goodness, and a different category of terms that seem to be pairs. Whole, part, same, different. But there's another principle that you use for understanding: analogy. And the simplest analogy is a three-term analogy. Analogy is usually expressed as a king is to his people as a shepherd is to his sheep, or two terms to express a relationship and connecting it to a different set of terms and balloons and confetti, so you can shed light on what you don't know compared to what you do know. Well, we need words for that. Lots of confetti, and that's okay. We can have lots of confetti. We like to have fun on this channel, so that's the kind of wacky whimsy that we engage in here. So, one, we need the principle, therefore, of a greater set and a lesser set. I can understand the greater, how a king relates to his subjects, by understanding the lesser, how a shepherd relates to his sheep. Lesser and greater have to be used in understanding necessarily for us to learn and develop and learn new things. The simplest analogy is when there's one guy on both sides. As Diotima taught Socrates, so too Socrates can teach us. So the simplest analogy has 3 terms. But within the analogy, we have a lesser, a greater, but we also need the principle of them coming together as a whole. Because by participating in this analogy, we, as the lesser term, becomes like the greater term, well, Diotima through a mean term. So in other words, Diotima passes the Dharma, the teaching of the Logos, to Socrates and he to us, so that we become like Diotima. And then allows us to teach someone else, so we become the same as Diotima. Hang on a second. By participating in this analogy, we give a whole to the analogy. Whole. We function like Diotima. When we participate in this analogy, we get the same teaching as Diotima. We can function in the same way when we teach other people. All of the greater terms in the pair of terms that we have as the Lego pieces of thinking, whole, part, same, different, everything we think uses that, everything that we experience uses that as well. Everything you've seen is the same as something and different than something. A whole of parts. So within an analogy, we have a lesser term, a greater term, but we also need a principle that is defined by all of the greater terms in the pairs. Now, I feel like I should maybe write this on the board, because it might be getting a bit complicated, but there are only 3 sets. Our question is, what is understanding? Hey, welcome. Welcome, Chemical Soup. What is understanding? Now, messy handwriting today. What we've also seen is this also relates to all experience, all perception, and everything that exists. Existence. Thank you for your emojis. The Lego pieces of reality, but in particular, how we can participate in the greatest way in reality. What's up? Well, you used to see what's up. What's up's on the board. We want to know what is understanding, or why is the greatest way we can function through understanding? And how does understanding help us understand experience, perception, existence, everything that is? Well, we talked about how there is a pair, there is the duads, or the pairs, the pairs, whole, and everything that you think or perceive or exists is a whole of parts, right? Understanding brings the parts. There's a beak, there is an eye, there is a wing, there are webbed feet, there's a body, there's a head. Duck. I understand it. Duck. I've brought the parts together to a. This is also the significance of naming, bringing the parts together into a whole. For us to think about a duck, for us to explain a duck or understand and explain it to someone else, but also for the duck to exist. By the way, the duck is the same as other birds in that they are the same as eagles in that they're both birds, but it's also different to make it a duck and not an eagle. So in that way, in being able to fly, it is like an eagle, but it's also unlike it because it is also quacks. And here's a chicken. It's a chicken. By the way, everything you've seen is either resting, at rest, or in motion. It's either unlimited, like counting 1, 2, 3, 4. That's unlimited, right? You can keep counting. Try it. See if you get to the end. Unlimited, or limit, or limit. And by the way, everything you've experienced has either been something experienced out of time. If you have ever separated your consciousness or soul from your physical body, there are many ways people do that. Near-death experiences, meditation experiences, or yoga experiences. Sometimes while playing sport, a lot of athletes talk about separating from the body and then making the greatest play they've ever made. Experiences where there's a high display of energy. We sometimes dance, song, childbirth, mushrooms. There are lots of ways you can separate yourself from the body. What we are learning, by the way, in using understanding, the greatest or the complete, therefore the model of spirituality, because all spirituality is in essence how to experience the realm of the spirit, which means you have to separate your spirit or consciousness or mind from your physical senses. Another way of saying that is awakening the eye of the soul, your sixth sense. Get M. Night Shyamalan on the phone, because we're ready to use our sixth sense. We have fun here.
Making ice cream's a good and courageous thing.
Yep. Always said that. Out of time or in time. So have you experienced eternity out of time? Oh, and same thing with thinking. While all of these things here describe as adjectives everything in time, the ideas themselves are eternal or out of time. In other words, if you have a whole cake and you eat a piece of it and it's no longer whole, the idea of wholeness is still there, which is great because that means we can eat lots of cake. Out of time or in time. By the way, why are we even using understanding if we cannot also recognize? Now, a fancy way for ones is monads. Means a oneness. Monads. Let's just say ones. Let's not be fancy. By the way, do you want to understand justice? Do we get pissed? Do we get angry if we witness or suffer an injustice? Is it that anger about injustice from childhood when our development of this was shut down to be a member of the family tribe? Does that anger cause our projections? Is that what we struggle with in our problems? Beauty. Don't you like beautiful things? We're talking about recognizing that there are some people who engage with understanding that seem to be far more transcendently beautiful than people who are blocked from understanding, ignorant people, or belief-based people, sexist beliefs, racist beliefs, religious beliefs. I'm right because Jesus. That's disgusting, right? It makes you want to puke a little bit. Hard to be beautiful if that's the way of being that you are. Even on Twitch, there are people who were celebrated for their physical beauty until they started to share their opinions, and they seem to be engaged in belief, and then all of a sudden they fall off. And equally so, people who are very confusing to a lot of people because they can't understand why they are so differently beautiful than everyone else. Because those people who are confused, the haters, don't know what understanding is, or they're believers. Beauty, justice, goodness. Don't you want to understand things because you'll think it'll be good for you to do so? You want to understand what's a good sandwich so you can understand which sandwich to eat, so that you can benefit? You want to understand how to be your higher self? Excellence? Do you want to understand reality? Now, put reality in here maybe. Again, none of these things you've seen as a noun or the word the. Through your physical senses. You've never seen the beautiful walking down the street. Hello, beautiful. Well, actually, you might say that. Especially if you're British. Hello there, beautiful. It's hard to do a British impression because there are so many different dialects. What are you doing right there then, love? How are you, my beauty? I don't know. Forget. They pretend I didn't. What's that over there? Distraction. So, again, these are nouns, or they exist out of time, while we experience them in time as adjectives. So these are the building blocks of understanding that we use. And we say, hang on a second, there's one more. Triads, or threes. Let's use a similar color. Let's go this one. Yep. Threes. Threes. For there to be a mean analogy, for you to learn to use understanding to benefit, you had to get it from someone. So as Diotima related to Socrates, so too does Socrates relate to us. That's an analogy like king is to his subjects, subs, as shepherd is to his sheep. That's a regular analogy, so we can understand the greater king to his subs as lesser by understanding what's more easy to access in our current level of thinking. Because terms vary, relations stay the same. That's analogy. That's how we think. That's how we can progress through this our evolution, or just learning. Keep it simple. So we need a pair of threes, lesser, to describe the students to a teacher. By the way, we need lesser because this our bots. Whoops. This is what you do to me, bots. You freak me out and I press all the wrong buttons.
And this is spam.
Spam.
You need to flood these platforms with fake people.
Or fake.
I hate to have to tell you this. That was fake. That was AI.
Fake AI.
Further fill the internet with spam and AI slop.
It's just slop.
It is spam. They are trying to convince them to flood the internet with spam.
Just spam. And to you we say...
It's sad. And I'm sad for you.
And we're sad for you.
I don't know if you know this, but like weird dudes exist everywhere.
Weird dudes exist everywhere, and it's
He's
you.
an AI guy.
You're an AI guy.
The internet is all robots.
It's all robots. Lesser. So, teacher to student is one version of this relationship from greater to lesser. But you could have another one. doctor to patient. There you go. So we need a word that incorporates all of the particulars, lesser to greater. But actually there are 3 terms. Because by us participating in this, we make this whole relationship a whole. That's the Dharma. That's the teaching. That's why it's important and necessary for us to share what we're learning here. Whatever it is that is your content that you create. We call it creating content now. The art that you make. How do you share? How do you use your voice? Notice, believers can only destroy. Trump can only blow things up and hurt people. Same thing for Netanyahu. Same thing for all of the believers. You can't believe your way into doing surgery. You can't believe your way into flying a plane. You can't believe your way into fixing someone's broken computer. But you can believe your way into destroying a computer, crashing a plane, taking funding away from all of the pilots currently right now in America, taking funding away from all of the cancer research, bombing children. You can only do harm. And if you don't realize this, and you embrace belief, and you take that as what it means to be knowing, harming people, punishment, cruelty, that's sadism. That's why it's so important. That's the stakes of asking this question, what is understanding? Because understanding is the use of our mind properly. Belief is imitation. That's why it's belief. You imitate who you believed. Teacher, parent, not teacher. Parent, minister, priest, rabbi. Imitation. The cycle of violence. Imitating cruelty as an imitation of understanding and knowing. That's sadism. The consequences of understanding is recognizing or using understanding to understand belief, and ultimately understand understanding so you can perfect your understanding, which allows us to solve all human problems because that's their root cause, and perfect yourself in your own excellence, gain benefit and benefit the world by understanding a goodness, create a just world, be glowing in that beautiful way that we've been talking about, because your functioning through understanding reflects reality. There we go, we've brought all of those monads together. We can distinguish the lesser cognitive function, belief, from the greater cognitive function, understanding. We are reverting upon the model that we are using with understanding. And whether you're a skateboarder reverting on Rodney Mullen, or a soccer player reverting on Lionel Messi, the more that you revert upon them, no, they're not models, they're examples, but I'm just using this as an analogy. The more you revert on the model of excellence, the more you perfect yourself and gain your own excellence. And goodness and benefit. But hang on a second. By understanding the model of understanding, we can define why exactly belief will always harm people. It's not that you believe the wrong God, it's believing anything is bad always. So while there are Christian nationalist Nazis in America that say, kill all the Jews, kill all the Muslims, kill all the Browns, concentration camps for the brown people, that's disgusting. And you ask them, hang on a second, do you see how disgustingly racist? And they'll say, but the Jews say they are the chosen people. Don't you find that disgusting? The Jews say they are the ones who get to kill the Palestinian children because their belief of God is that they should rule everything. And the Muslims are doing the same. Empirically, don't you see that's what they believe? Yep. But what are you doing? Oh no, not my beliefs, says every believer for all time. I'm not racist, but racism. I'm not a sexist. Some of my family members are women. And then they'll say something sexist. That's belief. To not have universal principles that are non-physical, but pointing to physical things and saying that one good, that one bad. And the standard is always whatever I grew up with. It's no coincidence that Muslim babies have Muslim parents, Christian babies have Christian parents, Mormon babies have Mormon parents. It is not a difficult puzzle to solve. Sound drop.
A space wizard farted out the universe. We definitely are not born with a starter kit of beliefs, buddy. Religion is shoved into children's brains forcibly through indoctrination, and if it's any kind of fundamentalism, it's essentially child abuse. Even if a kid was to come to this conclusion totally out of their own accord, that there is a divine entity that created everything, it sure as fuck wouldn't be the malicious sociopathic god that you assholes worship.
That's our friend, Professor Richard Explains. Follow him on YouTube. If you like someone with logic debunking religious irrationality. But see, we're going one step further. We're understanding the understanding itself. So why is it that all beliefs are in principle harmful? Without falling into the trap of a belief saying, well, it's because it's weird to me. It's different than my family. How about this? To be a believer, do you necessarily have to accept limits on how you think? Can't watch Harry Potter, only marry the Mormons if you're a Mormon. Give all your money to Scientologists if you're a Scientology person. Give all your money to the preacher if you're a Pentecostalist. Give all your money to the preacher if you're an evangelist. Give all your money to the preacher if you're a Christian. Hang on a second, there's a pattern unfolding. Seems like a lot of the necessary limitations you have to accept is giving money to the leader. Makes you think a little bit, doesn't it? So, in principle, you have to accept certain limits, including on your own development. You can't grow out of believing in Jesus as you learn more things. The same dumb belief in Jesus you had when you were 4 years old, you have when you're 94 years old. Otherwise, you don't get to be in the team. No growth, no development. A limit to development, a limit to the use of understanding, because if you understand something, why would you believe the guy who's saying that he speaks for God? By the way, how do they respond to people who are not limited by their own particular beliefs? Yep, they murder them, and torture them, and genocide their people, or yell, "You're going to hell," at them in the street. They are limited, and they are in conflict with unlimited. Why would you believe if you can understand for yourself? By the way, all of these principles of understanding, as we've just said, are out of time. You never see these things with your physical senses. That's why we say of believers or the right wing. So right wing is the same thing. It's people manipulated through belief by con artists and grifters. You might say that some of the right wing politicians are true believers. Get some crazies like that, but usually they're manipulating others. Trump's not a Christian, but he knows that he can manipulate Christians. That's not a hard puzzle to solve. But we say of those people, they respond to shapes and colors. And their only way of thinking is to appeal to their common beliefs, what they call common sense. Oh, I think this is right. Why? Common sense. It's another way of saying I agree with my own dumb opinions. Shapes and colors. Look at that brown person bad. shapes and colors. Woman, bad. They can only participate in time. How do they react to spirituality? If you say you can know the mind of God, they'll call you a heretic or a heathen. Infidel. You pick the group, they'll have a name for people who can experience knowing the whole of this all at once. All of this at once is the experience of oneness. So we can say oneness. That would be a monad, I suppose, oneness. Or unity. That's the experience, that's the spiritual experience called nous in the Greek. We say knowledge because we don't have that word with a capital N. I think we should just use the word nous. The knowledge with a capital K. Yeah, not N, capital K. It's also the spiritual experience. But from the book we've seen it's actually the second last spiritual experience because there's a greater one. And the fancy word for second last is penultimate. Impress your friends. Oh, you know that experience of divine luminosity that the Taoists call enlightenment? Say this part loudly at the coffee shop. It's actually penultimate. And then everyone in the coffee shop will say, and then you say loudly, and penultimate means second last, and they'll all think you're smart, and they'll say, and because you've owned the Taoists, they'll think you're clever, and they'll say, and because you're sitting next to Owen Wilson, he will overhear you, and he'll say, wow, 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 a bunch of times. So what do they do against knowing? The experience of timelessness or the spiritual experience? Shut up, get out of here, or we'll kill you. You're a pagan. You can only get to heaven when you die. It's the greatest grift. Because you don't have to buy, you don't have to grift people, normally you have to actually sell something. So you need overheads. But hey, you're selling belief. Free. Your supply costs are small. 0. And they can never come back with a faulty product. Oh, you only know when you die. So what do they do with people who understand or know? They kill them. That's why the fascists go after the thinkers. The time of the recording, the Saudi dictator who killed the American journalist was getting a lavish party in the Oval Office by Donald Trump, as he called the reporter asking him questions about such injustice. He said, "Shut up, little piggy," to the journalist trying to use understanding to understand justice. Fascists or believers go after people who use understanding or experience knowing. Another way of understanding that is in time, in opposition to out of time, just as limited by belief in opposition to freedom or unlimited. They are a part, we are the chosen people, and we want to blow up the whole world so Jesus comes back. We are different from you, and anyone that says that we should all be treated the same, wealth equality, harmony, no slavery, no genocide, they are evil communists or evil socialists. We are only different, and we need a hierarchy of difference with me at the top, and I need to hurt everyone else. Anyone who says we're all the same is a dirty commie. Difference in opposition to the same. You can go through all of these lists of pairs. By the way, these terms we could call selfers, because they have a selfhood or a self-existence independent from the physical world. For it to affect as adjectives everything in the physical world. As we said, if you have a whole and it becomes a part in the physical world, the idea of whole will still be there. Selfos. Self-whole, self-part. So experiencing these selfers as a unity is the penultimate spiritual experience of divine luminosity. That's the model of understanding, and what we are doing is breaking down the parts. In other words, for everyone who has used understanding, even if you're a believer, you've still used these principles, you've just used them in an ignorant and violent way that causes all human problems, which is the lesser. Here we have our idea of threes. The lesser is this term, the greater is this term. The lesser in opposition to the greater. So we can ask, well, where does it come from? Is there a filing cabinet and there's a file for whole in this one, and a different filing cabinet for part in this one, and a different filing cabinet for beauty, and this is a magical office building in the sky? No. These are all aspects of reality itself or being. That we can experience by awakening our sixth sense, ousia, or using our understanding to revert on the model of understanding that exists eternally as the realm of being, that is the source of the physical world becoming. Becoming. So what are we doing? We're reverting. We're using our space or our moments in time to perfect the greatest functioning we can do in time. Remember, belief is this side in opposition to that side. Materialism is this side and saying there is no whole, there is no model, there is no the establishment left, there is no principles of justice. Doesn't exist. So let's just all have our own personal beliefs, and if you can manipulate beliefs and like a fascist and take over, then let him do it. Kill everyone. Fucking concentration camps. Send the biggest KKK Nazis out into the street to murder people at will. Who gives a fuck? That's the establishment left. And the establishment right, or right-wingers, are doing the murdering and the looting and all of the injustice. Understanding, however, is to use our moments in time to reflect on the model of understanding that has to eternally exist in being out of time. And the more we do that, based, oh, thank you. The more we do that, we perfect. Just as the more you watch that Rodney Mullen, or Tony Hawk, if you're not a skater, you know who Tony Hawk is. The more you play Tony Hawk or watch him before you go out skating, the better you are at skating. The more you become like the model of excellence, the more that you perfect or gain the excellence of your art. Now, of course, Mullen or Tony Hawk is not the model, because they're still physical examples. The model has to exist out of time. That's the paradigm. The paradigm. It's in being. So we're using our moments in time to reflect on the model of understanding, which will give us the excellence of understanding, so that we can turn around and use it to understand all human problems as we are doing here. All human problems, in principle, if they're humans, they have to be functioning through their psyche. Before you reach out and do something, you have to distinguish that thing. You can't I don't know, what's the fascists doing in America now? You can't abduct the brown person unless you distinguish there's a oneness of that person different from the other people. In other words, you reach out and identify that's one person. Otherwise, they're camouflage and you won't see them. If you can't distinguish the one, that's what camouflage means. You have to think it's good to murder those people. Goodness. You have to recognize they are the same as all of the people that I hate, but also it's a different person than me. So, everyone functions through their state of mind, primarily, before they even do the bad things. So we can say the root cause of all human problems is their state of mind. And our state of mind can look at the physical world in time, or the world of becoming, or we can look at the model of thinking and perfect it, which is the model which exists out of time. And in doing so, we can recognize the different types of states of mind. There is a state of mind called materialism, the establishment left, that takes these pairs that define all things, all experience, all perception, all existence, and understanding itself, uses these Lego pieces. That's the point of categorization and systematization. Exactly. Thank you, Chatter. Some claps. Yes. This is understanding. Finding all of the parts, arranging them in a system, and also within a hierarchy. Believers misuse hierarchy to just say everyone who looks like me is the best because Jordan Peterson said so. Because Daddy says so. Trump says so. Shapes and colors people. This is the actual hierarchy understanding. Understanding there's a hierarchical ordering of these terms. Now, these aren't, you can play, have fun. That's metaphysics, by the way. Which of these terms is greater? As you awaken your ability to experience mind or being, do you first encounter beauty? Is justice deeper still? Does justice require beauty? Can it be beautiful if they're unjust? So they're interdependent, but which is greater? So you could have fun. That's metaphysics. Understanding the hierarchy of these terms. But now we can say there's a hierarchy within cognitive functions that uses these terms. The lowest we have is materialism, which is only physical things, or reductionism. Anything beautiful doesn't exist, it's fake. It's just chemicals in your brain telling you something's beautiful. Reducing everything to parts. A Rembrandt is just $5 worth of paint on a $10 canvas. That's all it is. We're all just physical things. The great chain of being. Right. Different. These are all aspects that are interdependent. But as you have this experience, separating yourself from the body, you can perfect your experience of beauty at deeper and deeper levels. Equally so, as we evolve, we can recognize materialism, which is the lesser, claiming there is no greater. The establishment left, there's no principles. Hey, while I accept that a pilot has to understand the principles of flying a plane, being a pilot has nothing to do with belief. Anyone can be a pilot so long as they've understood the principles of how flying a plane works, and will always use that understanding to benefit all of the passengers. Same too with the surgeon. Anyone can be a surgeon, has nothing to do with belief, and they always have to use their understanding of medicine to benefit their patients. In fact, every profession does that, except for politicians who claim there is no fucking principle and it's only beliefs, and you can harm the subjects. You can bomb people, you can exploit people, you can have wealth inequality, you can have the disgusting system of capitalism that exploits people and extracts and hoards wealth and profits off people's misery. Who's to say what's right and wrong? Politicians and religion are the only two professions that claim that they are special and don't need a model of understanding and don't need to always apply it to benefit. It's just your dumb beliefs. That's why the most ignorant and harmful human beings are attracted to politics and religion. We can watch it happen and experience the consequences of it, but what we are doing here is understanding why it happens, why it will always happen at this stage of human evolution that has not yet understood the model of understanding. Any galaxy, in any multiverse, on any planet, in any dimension, if they have woken them or evolved to the state of having words and being able to think or reflect, logos is the use of words, ousia is self-reflection, they will have a potential to be materialists, the establishment left that denies the higher. We shouldn't hire philosophers. I should be in charge with my stupid beliefs. The establishment right, or right-wingers, which are in opposition to understanding, kill all the thinkers, defund all the schools, defund all the science, bomb all the children, kill all the journalists. Materialism, belief, but the third cognitive function, so that's 5, we'll say 5 for materialism, 4 for belief. The third is understanding. But here's the rub. We are all believers because we all start out having to believe the family clan that we were stuck in before we were old enough to reflect in this way. So everyone's individual problems are caused by belief. Our global or cultural problems is the veneration or pedestalization or pushing up on high, the universalization of our own personal family beliefs. So everyone is in this game. Everyone. That's a principle of humanity. We're all suffering problems that repeat because of the cognitive function of belief. Therefore, the meaning of life in principle for everyone includes necessarily the movement from belief into understanding. That's what we have on the board. Only in understanding can you understand this. And just as you have to understand medicine to be a doctor, so too do you have to understand human cognition to heal human problems, solve human problems, but also to gain our excellence, which is using understanding to reflect on the model, which is what we're doing here. So everything we're saying here is not a belief or opinion or something that can be dismissed. If you kill one person, this will still be true. If you blow up the world, this will still be true. It's just a matter of integrity to recognize this is the purpose of everyone's life. To reflect on the model of what you're doing anyway. You're still thinking anyway. You're either stuck in materialism based on belief, rejecting or fighting against your benefit, your goodness, your excellence, or you can wake up, why am I fighting against my own interests like a tragic hero? Why don't I go on the hero's journey to reflect on this way of being and perfect what I'm doing anyway, read the manual, and have fun in the game? Therefore, necessarily, To solve human problems, we have to recognize the model of belief and why it's the cause of problems, and to move from belief into understanding. That's what we're doing here. And we do that by reflecting on the model. That's what we're doing here. And so far we have 1, 2, 3 sets of terms, one categorized by pairs, one categorized by onenesses, and now we're working on the last category, threes. Let me catch up with the chatty chat. Okay. There is no such thing as one, there are only ones, plural. The problem of universals is resolved, many not one. Exactly. That's the way of thinking of materialism. So, for there to be an existence of anything, there has to be the greater and a lesser. There has to be the principle of whole, but also parts. In other words, there is a section of part that isn't whole. But there's also a section of whole that's not parts. And then there is an overlap in this Venn diagram where you can have parts that come in together into a whole. Now, what our friend in chat has said, hey, by the way, you could also say one and many. That's a pair. That could go into the pairs list. There are materialists, as we were talking about earlier, so when the chat was made, who say there's only a many. There is not a whole, or there's not a one. Now, materialists go one step further and say, well, actually, there's not even a oneness, because oneness implies the overlap, where one and many come together. That's the experience of nous, or mind turning about and knowing everything all at once. The second last, penultimate if you fancy, spiritual experience of divine luminosity. So materialists say there is no whole. There is no oneness. Now, we would push them by saying, actually, for this coffee mug to exist, must there be a unity of parts? And in other words, their position falls apart through a structure of questions that promote the self-reflection. There's our first term, ousia. And use of language, there's our second. They're the two we need. A series of questions that encourages them to engage with language or reason systematically, reflecting on their own selves. That's the dialectic. That's the use of this model to benefit people. Just as a doctor uses the model of medicine to benefit patients, a dialectician uses this model of understanding to ask questions that encourage ousia, self-reflection, and logos, language. And you're right, their position falls apart. Let me catch up. Close to Leibniz. I don't know him. Fun name though, Leibniz. Monadology. Ooh, fancy. We got a fancy man in chat. We have the best chatters here. To our chatters, we say,
I'm too pure.
you're too pure. The entire hierarchy is illusory, it becoming virtue of a movement, extension, referring to Parmenides' being. Yes, this is Parmenides. All this comes from Parmenides. Parmenides says, hey, by the way, Socrates, Parmenides was Socrates' teacher. You won't experience the realm of being, if there is all of these things that exist as principles that you experience as adjectives. In other words, they cause the physical world, but they're not in the physical world. That would be insane. Because when you're a part, your whole coffee mug becomes parts. The idea of whole doesn't dissipate. That would be mental. But you won't experience the realm of being unless you master the dialectic. How to use these building blocks, which we are nailing down today, in a series system of reflection to awaken that cognitive function of nous or knowingness, which means a hierarchy of cognitive functions. Materialism as number 5. Write that on the board. Materialism. That's it. That material. Oh my handwriting. materialism, or strict dualism, which means only parts, no whole, like the establishment left. Dualism. Belief, which we've said is a conflict from the lesser in conflict with the greater. Understanding is what we're nailing down here. And our understanding, as we've seen, can result in us understanding a series of questions to encourage a believer here to reflect on their position and purify their ignorance. So it has a beneficial or purification art. Just as you have to benefit your patients, the art of understanding or the dialectic benefits human souls. So you could say a dialectician is a doctor of souls. But understanding can also be used to, as we are doing here, understand that it's so messy today and I need to make it a bit neater. No, that was a joke. Understand, whoops, 3 comes after 4. Understand the model of understanding, which is not reflecting down to help those at a lower stage, but reflecting up on the model of understanding. And that's the spiritual practice or a yoga, because it's a method. And it's the only spiritual practice which includes understanding. It's not like other yogas where it's let your thoughts float away like a cloud and that kind of crap. It's therefore the paradigm or model of spirituality, because it's all of the pieces together. Understanding the model which can awaken the ousia, or the experience of knowingness or knowledge. Now we use a capital knowledge because we need the Greek word, because this is and don't be put off because it's Greek. You use the word croissant, don't you? That's French. And we use the word croissant because we didn't have a word for it. But if you can't order a croissant unless you have the word croissant. You can't fulfill your purpose here to purify your false beliefs that are the cause of problems. And the materialist functioning based on that model of belief, debate bros. I'm right because look at me use language to win an argument. No. Does a doctor say to his patient, oh, I'm going to own you by using my medical knowledge to make you feel bad, and I win? Notice we still have problems. Academic philosophers who just engage in debate are not fucking solving anything. What we are learning is the art of understanding, which is the opposite of debate, which is based on materialism, which is why they teach it in colleges. Dialectic. Dialectic can be used to, as we just said, help people see the absurdity of their belief and maybe even trace the effect of their own particular false belief through their life, causing their problems to its origin. Needed to purify your false beliefs. That use of dialectic is called philosophical midwifery. Socrates says you need dream analysis too, because dreams will give you the clues for that kind of reflection. But we can also use understanding to reflect on the model, as we're doing here, which allows us to perfect our understanding. So knowing perfects our understanding, but it can also awaken, because it's a systematic, focused self-reflection with curiosity on something that exists in being. It is being. That's formally all of the qualities for meditation. The experience of it as a whole is knowledge, and we can even use this to understand. We can use understanding to understand that spiritual experience of nous. That's what I was doing. I was writing it, the Greek word. So just because not to be fancy, not to be a fancy pants. We're regular Joes here. Philosophy's for everyone. Just common men. We're just men. We're just regular men. But because we don't like croissant, we need the word nous, is the Greek word for knowledge. Dianoia is the Greek word for understanding. Belief is fine, materialism is fine. So we can even understand what knowledge is because, hey, strict dualism, materialism, draw a line. The establishment left. Modern academia. Belief, conflict. Look, I hate people who are sameness. We are the chosen people. Wholeness, blow up the world so Jesus comes back. Freedom, you have to only date a Mormon and never watch Harry Potter. It's the devil. And give all your money to me. Ooh, did I say that out loud? I mean, give me your women. Oops. I mean, your golden jets. Oops. So, again, hypocritical, but conflict between understanding is to have this model of the whole, which is why we're doing what we're doing, and function beneficially to the parts. The inverse of believers who have the parts or the lesser and act in harm to the greater. That's why, in principle, the root cause of all human problems is belief-based cognition. That's the root cause. The solution is its inverse or its opposite or the next stage in human evolution to do what we're doing here, get the whole and learn the art of how to use the whole with the parts to benefit the parts. So you're doing both. That's Hercules. Mythology is taking these principles and personifying them in stories. Hercules has his mind as the whole, feasting with the gods in heavens, but also is in Hades dealing with the parts. So it's both together with the greater functioning with the lesser. It's a functioning. Whereas the model is the whole. If it's a model, it has to be the whole that accounts for all parts. So it's the greatest number of parts for the model. It wouldn't be much of a model if there are parts left out. But seeing as what we're talking about is the model for all understanding, thinking, perception, existence, it's the paradigm, the universal model of justice, of beauty, of goodness, of benefit. So it's the highest, so it's the greatest whole of the greatest parts. So you can have fun yourself recognizing, oh, now I can understand the principle of justice and beauty and goodness and what we need to benefit, and also the enlightenment experience. Mysticism doesn't have to be scary or weird, and I don't have to shave my head and wear an orange robe and sing Hare Krishna and sit under a waterfall for 40 years. It's actually easy and fun once you have the model. Because and you could go through history. Did Jesus have an experience of divine luminosity on the, what do they call it? The transfiguration experience? And he talked to some people after. Did Achilles have a brilliant light experience? Is the brilliant light of experience the point of Plato's Republic? Does Goku have a brilliant light of being experienced to transition into becoming a Super Saiyan? It's the model of the hero's journey. It's the model of all stories. But the thing is, when you have understanding, your friend can come to you and say, oh my God, I did mushrooms, or I was just walking down the street and all of a sudden I got this experience of something that was the most real thing I've ever experienced. I wish there was someone to talk about this to. All I have met is believers who hate me for suggesting such a thing and want to burn me at the stake, or materialists who mock me and say it's woo-woo. It's just your brain chemistry playing tricks, they say. But they're both wrong because I know it to be the case. It was the most real thing I've ever experienced. You can sit down and say, real? Uh-oh. I understand what that is. That's one of those Selfer terms in the monad class, the one class of ones. Let me ask questions that can allow you to, what does a good person do? Dialectic. What's dialectic? Dialectic, or the art of this. The art of this. Art of understanding. The dialectic. Which is a series of questions to encourage ousia. Again, fancy name, but you know, don't be scared. I used a fancy name in Majority Report's Twitch chat and I got banned immediately. They've got a problem with their Twitch moderators. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to use the word anymore. I went on the YouTube Majority Report chat and I didn't even use the word, and simply agreeing with the insightful Brendan and Emma.
I'm cute. Like, it's cutie pie.
He keeps reminding us that she's cute. The moderators said, "You sound like a cultist. What are you selling? You can get the fuck out of here." Majority Report. The people who are supposed to embrace understanding and encourage discord. Both of their social media platforms have moderators that are fucked in the head. It's a problem. That's why there was Beefgate 2025. And I'm refusing to go onto the Majority Report until they permanently unban me for speaking the truth. Simply with reference to what was being said and agreeing with the hosts. Someone should say something to them about what's going on there, because I don't like them anymore. Well, that's not true. I do like them. They're doing very good work. I don't like to watch the show because every time I tune in, there's a big message saying you are banned from chat. And also it says your appeal. So I made an appeal saying what I said was true. It was fair. It was referencing what was being said. It was agreeing with the hosts. And the ethos of the show is to encourage reasoned self-reflection and conversation. So you banning me without even saying anything to me is not fair within the ethos of the show. It took less than a minute for them to deny my unban request, showing they didn't give two shits about someone who's been watching the show for a very long time. That's the Majority Reports. Twitch moderators and the YouTube moderators aren't much better. I'm still not banned from that, but only just. There's one YouTube moderator who was somewhat reflective, but as soon as the other moderator's like, "Who is this guy? What are you selling? You sound like a cultist talking about a principle of understanding." No, Brandon said that. Are you listening to the fucking show? I was agreeing with him. "You can move along, pal." Then even the one good YouTube moderator began to side with the fascists. That's the problem with belief. It's in opposition to the good and truth, and it's bound by a clan loyalty to ignorance and hatred and violence against anyone different as a mark of knowing sadism. The very thing that whole channel has been trying to do, understand the root cause of human problems and solve political problems, is happening in their very channel. Just saying. And that's why there was that huge beef that broke the internet, Beefgate 2025, where I refused to go on the Majority. I haven't been asked yet, but I still refuse to go on that show until I get permanently unbanned for being right about everything all the time.
You're a baby. You're a little baby.
That's what we say to the Twitch moderators. To the Twitch moderators, you are...
It's a total shit show.
It's a total shit show over there. But of course, normal, to be expected. This is the difficulty with telling the truth or being a true philosopher. human problems are specifically defined by being in opposition to learning. If you could learn, you wouldn't be in your problem. In fact, in this particular YouTube one, where I was agreeing with Brendan, who is on there on a Thursday, saying, you know, we need a universal model or some principles, because these people have one rule for you and a different rule for me. One rule for me, one rule for thee. They're hypocrites. We need principles that help everyone. So here I was saying, oh man, Brendan's quite insightful, something I say often because he is. Fuck, what was I saying? I got distracted by thinking about Brendan's state of mind, which is really good. You'll find him on Thursday's Fun Half, what I call Majority Report All Stars. He also has his own Twitch channel, which is fun. Right. So, yes, of course, to be expected, because all human problems have this problem with belief, and because they're blocked from actual understanding and knowledge, all they can do is imitate, and the person they're imitating is their model of this that they have been doing. So they model the injustice their parents did to them from childhood. That's sadism. It's sadism because they enjoy it. There's a reason why the billionaires are not feeding people. They're instead bombing people. They enjoy the infliction of suffering on human beings because that's the model of belief. And their particular version of harm based on belief is the one they suffered from childhood. It's not surprising that Trump's a grifting, racist, sadist, chauvinistic, sexist pig. If you know anything about his parents, it's not a tough nut to crack. Necessarily, as part of our learning process from moving from beliefs in childhood, this is the next stage. Therefore, what we are doing now is understanding the model, which can be directly apprehended as the spiritual experience. The understanding of it is the method, it's the preparation. The art of dialectic, which uses two things, or encourages the use of two things. Ousia, let's move this up so I can write. So Beefgate 2025, it broke the internet last week when I was hamming it up.
If you're experiencing a mental health episode, we don't want to have to see that.
Exactly, that's what I say to the Twitch moderators.
I've been a bad little girl.
Emma has been by allowing them to exist.
They're completely lying to you. Yeah. They're completely lying.
Because they're completely lying. Logos and ousia, self-reflection and language. So again, when we hadn't developed a good use of that, and we are in a dangerous position dependent on the false beliefs and that sadistic knowing of our parents, now, it's not a personal attack, it's everyone's. That's what it means to have integrity, to realize everyone is in this position. But not my religion, but not my parents, but not, yes, everyone's. That's what it means to have a principle. The use of understanding, therefore, is to employ ousia, which is self-reflection. Notice Trump saying he's never reflected on himself. He doesn't like self-reflection. What a weird thing to say. Logos, which is reason and language. It's obviously a lot more, but that's okay for now. Language. And by the way, logos is its activity, and it's also the model itself. This model that we are breaking down into parts is what it's like to experience that oneness as a state of mind. Meaning, being able to break it down into parts that can allow us to perfect our functioning in the physical world through understanding, that state of being is intelligible, which means it's not only knowable, but understandable. So the logos is also that principle of universal justice and beauty and goodness and benefit that's needed for every political party forever, in any dimension. In other words, the Majority Report and Emma and Brendan and the gang that are saying, and that are realizing, holy shit, the establishment left seem to be the little bitches of the right, yes, they're right. We need a universal system of principles that benefit everyone, not just the wealthy elites. They call themselves elites, wealthy grifters. Yes, by the way, as we said earlier, the reason why we're bringing in these key words is because if you don't have the name for it, you can't use it. If you don't know what a quarterback is, how can you enjoy the football game? The name for the model that they've been seeking all this time is the logos. Tell your friends. So, your friend has that experience. And they go to their family and their family mocks them for not having the way of being that they all have. They go to their church and they get told that if you ever talk about something like that, you'll go to hell. They go to their friends and that they know from school and they'll mock them because they're materialists. Oh, I'm not going to threaten you, but you're an idiot. Don't you just know that it's just your brain chemistry? It's just drugs, man. It's just squirting. That's all. And then they go to they think, well, you know who's the smartest people that I know? Well, some of them are on this majority report. Yeah, they are the people who seem to be the most rational, most caring, good heart, good head. I'm going to share it with, probably they've got a good community of people who help me reflect on this brilliant light of being experience that was the most real and beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my life. And then, of course, because of the huge problem they have with both YouTube and Twitch that they need to address, they get mocked and called a occultist and told that they were selling something, which is what the fuck? I'm not selling anything. What are you selling? You can move on. I can move on? I've been watching this show for longer than you've been here, pal. I don't know if that's true. But it's a pretty disgusting thing to say to someone who was agreeing with the hosts. Right? Right? Am I right or am I wrong?
It's a total shit show.
Total shit show. I agree with Emma. So they've been banned from that community. So who do you go? Well, thankfully you've been watching this stream, and you'll say, you know what? I'll talk to you about that experience, so long as you buy me the coffee. Meaning it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
And you use this model of understanding or dianoia to benefit the person. Well, it wouldn't be helping them remove their beliefs, we've already covered that, but understand their experience. So you would encourage a self-reflection, ousia, but also words, understanding. Use this. Talk about it, pal. Now, don't give them the words. It's their birth. That's why it's called philosophical midwifery. You don't want to influence them. It's not a belief thing where you have to make everyone believe your shit. No, it's not belief. It's the opposite. Talk about it. It was the most real. What was it like? Notice. Like. You're using the model. What was it like? As a question to encourage ousia reflection with words, logos. This is the excellence of human functioning. This is reading the handbook and knowing how to press the buttons to win the game, to use a video game analogy. What will they say? Well, I experienced everything. Everything? What do you mean everything? Oh, just like everything. It was everything. Like the culmination of evolution almost. It's like that. Translate it. Unlimited. Down here. Unlimited. Infinity. Like, there's that anime where the guy has an infinite domain or something. And I've even watched the movie at the cinema. It still makes no fucking sense. Jutsu Kaiden or something. It looked like it'd be really cool. I can never get into it. I am into it. But it's just, there's too much happening. They explain their powers, but they still don't. Anyway, that's anime rant for today. But now ask them a follow-up question. By the way, limit. Was there anything outside of it? Oh no, now that you mention it, it was everything. What was it like? So you're asking them about their state of mind, which actually can bring them back into that experience. That's how we can get back there. It's a remembering. The experience itself is a remembering. It's a remembering of reality, of beauty, of goodness. That's how we recognize beauty and goodness and justice, or its absence, in the physical world. We don't learn these things from the physical world. It's a memory. Our mind had experienced it before our incarnation. So it's a kind of yoga. Was there anything outside of it? All you're doing is using his word of infinity, or whatever he used. Use his words and ask him a question about its pair. Was it self-contained? Was there anything outside of it? Amnesia correct. Sorry, I'm a bit behind on the... I just saw amnesia correct. I will catch up on your chat. I apologize. I'm on a bit of a rant. Limit. What's he doing? He is gaining a better understanding of that thing he experienced, maybe even bringing it back to mind. And then the next time he has that experience, what's it like seeing a football game if you know nothing about football? If you don't understand it? If you don't know what a quarterback is? Is it boring or stupid? Or if it's a rugby game, is it even scary? Whereas, you could be watching the World Cup final between the All Blacks and the Wallabies, and still you would rather be anywhere else. But if you know all the words, you know what a scrum is, you know what a 5/8 is, you would pay a year's salary to watch that game. Same principle. All right, so let's catch up in the chat. I apologize for taking my time here. Parmenides being, yes. Oh, by the way, this is all Parmenides, right? So as we're saying, Parmenides uses these terms to outline these 4 cognitive functions. And also Parmenides says, you know, for every one of them, there's a way of thinking, or a way of develop, or a stage of human evolution, or a cognitive function that's in opposition to it. There is the 6th hypothesis, which rejects knowledge. There is the 7th that rejects understanding. You might recognize that as, so if understanding is there is a providential connection between the whole and the parts, what would be its opposite? The world is a battleground between the forces of good and evil. There's the rejection of belief. That's the 8th hypothesis. And there's the rejection of the materialism, which we recognize as nihilism. There aren't even any parts. That's why the Parmenides is the greatest book never read. It outlines all 9, and by the way, he gives you all of these are not real. All of these are shadows, imitations. Because his first hypothesis is the real one. The self. The one self. But he gives you all other ones, these other 8. So it predates Christianity before it even came to be. We could have avoided the Dark Ages and the Crusades and all of the terrible shit that's happened if we only listened to Parmenides. So he experienced his equivalent of being banned in the Majority Report's Twitch chat.
That's anti-feminist in some way?
The greatest book never read. That's Parmenides. Parmenides said, hey, by the way, you won't be able to experience knowledge unless you learn the dialectic. Master the art of understanding. If you don't, you won't experience the truth, which is a word to describe knowing. So let me catch up. Universalization is illusory. Well, there's two differences. So we've seen for each one of these stages of evolution, there is a kind of universalization. You think your way is the best. That's why I always chuckle when someone says, I'm a realist. All they're saying is, I agree with all of my own opinions. How brave of me. In other words, believers think what they are saying is universal. Materialists think their worldview is true. Nihilists think that their idea that there isn't even parts, there isn't even a material world, they don't recognize it's just one way of thinking. That would be a dialectician, someone who has an art of understanding could recognize that. They think it's real. That's the issue. Is your ones category a list of hypostases? What do you mean by hypostases? Hypotheses, in other words, hypothesis is it's a theory. In other words, these are all theories. You won't know them until you move into knowledge and you can confirm them. Knowledge is the experience of that oneness or reality that confirms the understanding. So yeah, there are all kinds of ones. Everything fits in there. So all of these categories would apply to what kind of ones you exist. So if you say, you know what? The one self, that's number one at the top. The one self, a pure one that doesn't even have any parts, that can't exist. The greatest kind of one is a oneness of all parts. That's why I'm a Taoist. Yeah, of course. So you have an idea of one that's linked to the second hypothesis or knowledge. A believer would say, the only kind of oneness that can exist, you can't experience either of those two. That's crazy. That's crazy. So that, if you think that, we say...
Bitch.
We say...
Disgusting. I'm so disgusted.
So disgusted. The best is a kind of imitation of that, where you get together in a mega church and you all sing Alleluia Jesus. A oneness of physical parts is my highest idea of one. Belief, stage 4. Stage 5, even less than that, because you grew up in a belief system, in a family. These are materialists can mock the believers, hey, you're just making up nonsense. The greatest kind of one is a part. So you're right. So each one of these stages has an idea of one, has a way of understanding, has possible states of mind they can experience, possible enlightenment states they can experience. All we are doing is understanding the whole map, which is using understanding to know its model. Because it is knowable, and it's only in knowing it can you confirm this. In other words, this is just what's likely. It's the best explanation of what exists until you can confirm it. There is no whole. Whole is by definition indivisible. One is right. Okay, so that's fantastic. You've done really well in that you're putting words on what you think about one in a whole. Why? Because you are reflecting on being. Notice, we're not reflecting on who Tom Cruise is dating today, or how many beans there are in China. One and whole are non-physical principles that affect the physical world of becoming, but for it to affect any planet, in any galaxy, in any time, still the principle of one is there. It has to itself have an existence that transcends. That's the principle of cause and effect. So, by expressing your idea of being, you're doing the right thing. Because your idea of one, your idea of whole, are all things in being. That's what you want to put words on. Dialecticians encourage that. So if one and many is an illusion, a false dichotomy, what people mean by one is unity, and they can't discern the semantic nuance. Right, so to be able to discern the kinds of semantic or logos, words that they use to define their understanding of one or unity, would it be able to help you see where they are? Just like a doctor would say, tell me about what it's like. Can you lift your arm this way? Does it sting when you pee? It's not a blame game or a shame game, not debate, fuck that. It's to see where they're at. So then you can see, this is where you're at within the model. That's why you need the model. And then you can ask them the next question that will allow them to understand their own position and maybe see where it falls down and maybe move to the next. So many people think one is a unity, but not a pure one. Exactly. That's one kind of one, a unity of parts. But what we're seeing is, hang on a second, for there to be whole and part, we need there to be whole here and parts. They're connected, there's an overlap, but they're two different ideas. That's the Venn diagram. Meaning we can place materialists and believers down here that can only relate to the parts or the lesser. We can find people who use understanding that can bring the parts into a whole and understand the whole of an idea or the whole of a subject. We can put the spiritual experience of knowing all the parts as a oneness, called the brilliant light of being, here as well, because it's a whole of all parts. But then we have a final question. What in the shit is this section of the diagram that's a whole that is not touched by parts? The greater that's not touched by the lesser. The out of time that transcends all time. Or the one that's not a manyness, to refer back to what you were saying. Now, let's make it meaningful. One more step. What's another part? One, many, or self and other? What is the section of self that's not touched by other? Now you've made it meaningful. You've connected it to the self. Without that, it ain't meaningful. So yeah, good point. Got the best chatters. Material is an illusion. Well, yeah, in one sense. Like if there has to be a cause, if you take these as a hierarchical system of reality, then you would say, first there has to be the one before there is many. And then there has to be the idea of two. So now we've got all these duads. Whole, part, same, different, etc. These list of twos or duads. So from there, you can have various different enlightenment experiences of the whole of all parts. You can put a map about different enlightenment experiences. That's the ox herding pictures of Buddhism is similar to that. And all of the ways of thinking in physical world, nihilism, materialism, belief. As you move from one to the greater, yeah, you'll see the former as an illusion, or a shadow, or a reflection, or a copy of a model. Is the copy as real as the model? Like a dream, you might say, well, the dream feels real for as long as you're in it. That's the point. Because reality is one of those monads. Reality is one of those monads we had on the board. In other words, we are looking for categories of reality. Your position is as real as for as long as you're in it. That's why it's a problem. Cognitive function is a problem. Absolute pure being is incognizable. Apophatic. So what we are doing is proving that position to be, well, doesn't work. So what we are doing is understanding being. It's intelligible, meaning it's apprehendable directly and also understandable. Here's the rub. If you are in a certain position, you might be told, well, I can't understand it, therefore no one can understand it, says my daddy, says my yoga teacher. No, we're understanding it. It's right on the board. You can have a look. And we can use that understanding to help people understand what they might have experienced as a glimpse. That's the significance of dream analysis. You have states of mind in your dreams, high ones or low ones, but you forget it. You don't see the significance of it. But in dream analysis, you can ask questions which can bring you back into that state, but also because you're experiencing that state of mind through the dialectic, you can also understand it. This is another thing that makes me laugh, because I've been around people interested in this stuff for a while, and it's very funny to me because of how similar their responses are. Everyone's at a certain level of development of understanding and experience, states of mind and functioning, model and activity. That's the fundamental thing we've got. The model and the activity. What we're looking at is the model here of being, and its activity is understanding, knowledge and understanding. The two together is wisdom. Philosophia means love of wisdom, having the model as a direct experience and the understanding together, both is needed for wisdom. That's what it means by definition. So philosophy is nothing other than that. That's what it is. But also, to awaken this kind of understanding where you reflect on the model, you have to start interested in learning this or that. I like computers. I like learning how to do skateboarding. I like learning science. But there'll come a part where you realize, hang on a second, there are certain principles that we take for granted. 1 and 1 is 2. Whole and part, same and difference. And certain things that are not being answered by science in the physical world. Mind, consciousness, beauty, reality, goodness, justice. All of the things that are experienced as adjectives here, but how do we know them as nouns? That's the movement from philomathesis, love of learning, into philosophy, love of wisdom. So, everyone's at a certain level of development of learning down here, or level of development in their state of mind of being, if they have opened their eye of the soul that allows them to separate their soul from the body and experience the realm of being. So what's the joke? The joke is, whatever level you're blocked on, there is a way of being called certainty, where you think, my problem is the end. I know it all. That's why openness and curiosity is essential. Socrates calls it being stung. We call it carrying a question, because if you carry a question, you're on a quest. So the joke is, like, let's take, I always use him as an example. Trump says, magnets. No one understands magnets. Said this last week. No one understands magnets? Really? No one? What do you think it's the likelihood for Trump is to go out and learn how magnets fucking work? Big fat 0. Someone who understands magnets. Do you think Trump will be able to perceive that person if he's certain? That's what it means to be blocked by a problem. It's your ceiling, it's your limit. Pathologos, your sick logos, a false belief, and it's categorized by certainty. If you think you know, how can you learn? Someone who does know magnets is not going to be seen by Trump, If you ask Trump to talk about the scientists, he's going to get angry and confused because you're asking him to relate to a reality he can't see. That's a block. Someone who knows about magnets, you might ask them a question. Oh, interesting. You know about magnets? Oh, yes, I do physics. Physics, that's interesting. By the way, why did you do physics? What do you mean? I'm asking you about a cause. What's the cause of you doing physics? My physical body walked into the physics department and I physically opened my physical textbook. Really? Let me ask you this. If your mind decided it was more good or beautiful to do something else, would your physical ass be physicaling itself to some other physical place to do something else? Now here's the rub. They're either going to be pissed about that question, call you names, you're a this, you're a heathen, you're a woke, you're a woo-woo, you're a fairy, there's always names that will belittle the question for people who are certain. Those names reflect their own problem, by the way. They're projecting. They will have that feeling of certainty that shits on the logos, just like Emma's Twitch chat.
You're a baby. You're a little baby.
Little baby Twitch chatters, Twitch moderators. They have their own way of calling you a whatever they called me. It's not me. They didn't understand anything I was saying. They're stupid. They're stupid.
Talking about a bunch of slop.
They're always talking about a bunch of slop.
I don't know if you know this, but like weird dudes exist everywhere.
Everywhere, and especially as the moderators. So, their kind of projection reflects their problem. Easy to see. Because sometimes people will start getting mad at you and they'll call you things that have they've never heard before. I've never heard that before. That's you. That's a you problem. Anyway, they'll either be blocked. That reflects a certain state of mind of certainty that has a way of being or activity. There's the model, the state of mind has an activity. It's all model and activity. The activity will be unique to that model, will reflect the model. Just as we're learning the model of understanding, our activity will improve, will gain excellence in our activity. Their activity that shuts down the logos is called the pathologos, and their model or state of being, which is marked by a certainty, is the being of the pathologos. The model of the pathologos, a state of being that's unique, well, that's unique to them, but it's particular to their family. So the idea in philosophy is to get people curious. Otherwise, they won't learn shit. Trump won't learn shit about magnets because he's not curious. He thinks he knows that you can't know about magnets. The closed-minded physicist thinks he knows that you can't ask questions about the mind. You can't put it in a test tube. So how can you do experiments? Because science is about torturing Mother Nature so that she will reveal her secrets. That's empiricism. Torturing monkeys and shit. Dropping bombs on humans and shit. To reveal nature's secrets. Notice materialism's approach to learning is sadistic in principle, torture, just as the cognitive function of belief is in principle sadistic. Why? Because belief shuts down understanding, but it's sadistic in principle because that state of being where you harm someone is wanted and enjoyed as a mark of knowing. This whole Epstein Island shit is the same fucking thing. Give someone a position of power over someone and they play out their sadistic model of knowing based on belief. That's why the dialectic used to uncover your unsuspected model of knowing, of certainty, which is always bad in principle, is a moral and ethical responsibility for everyone. Therefore, every school before morning tea time should be doing this. But notice, we're using the same words. Harm, sadism, injustice. There is a version of these terms that are reflected into its opposite. Badness, harm, injustice, pseudo fake excellence. Let's go back to that in a bit, because we're asking, why is it funny? Well, the funny part is, whatever level you're at, whether you're a materialist or a nihilist or an empiricist or whatever you're at, if you're blocked, you will say, not, well, I don't understand that. You'll say, it's not understandable. In principle, you're universalizing your own personal block by saying no one can understand it. That applies to everyone's level down here, like the crappy physicist and the crappy president we talked about, but also spiritual experiences. People have had states of being out of the body. People have understood that. You can't be a guru, proper guru, unless you do understand it, because otherwise how are you going to help anyone? Here's the rub. If you're in a spiritual tradition that doesn't have the logos, understanding, dianoia, dialectic, you'll find a Buddhist and a Taoist cross each other on a path and they won't say hi because they don't recognize each other. In other words, while you may be able to jump into this state of mind or this state of mind, unless you have understanding, you won't be able to recognize both and the model that they're both on. So whenever you get to a point where you say, that's just unknowable, and there are lots of words for it, what's the word for unknowable? You can't put words on it. Oh, there's some fancy words. I can't remember it anymore right now. Ineffable. Ineffable is one of them. It's not real. In principle, it can't be real. Because reality has to follow some sort of structure for there to be cause and effect, for there to be a physical world with principles that are eternal. There has to be something creating and maintaining all of these understandable principles in each moment. Meaning there is an understandability as its effect, meaning the cause has to be understandable. But even that cause of the physical world, pure being, the enlightenment experience, has to have its cause. And again, its cause has to be understandable. The creation has to reflect the model. In principle, like that's always going to be true everywhere. Now, so this is the principle of analogy. Relations are constant, but terms vary. So what we can see is, for that nihilist, he's still using these same terms of understanding. He's just using them to reject them. There's no part, there's no whole, there's no same, there's no difference. The materialist says there's only parts, there is no whole. That's why it's a line in between them. The believer says we are a part that has to attack everyone in the whole, or attack free people. Belief in conflict. In other words, it's still understandable. Even the spiritual experience we can understand as the whole of all parts. That's why it's eternity. And that's why you can have development. Because in principle, there has to be a doctor of the soul who can recognize the different parts according to a model, ask the questions to help the development to higher states of enlightenment. And as we see in Homer, even having enlightenment experiences is not the same as surfacing your unsuspected false beliefs from here. You have to be doing two. One is philosophy, the study of wisdom, love of wisdom. The art of the dialectic to surface your blocks is philosophical midwifery, two different functions. And we have that trope in anime. We have the sage, like Jiraiya, who was Naruto's sage, who's also a pervert, or Tsunade, who's also a gambler, the drunken master, the pervy sage. So there's two uses of the dialectic. One's a purification, one's a perfection. And Socrates came along and said, you won't get the specific material to do both unless you do dream analysis. That's your guide. And you won't unpack the meaning of your dreams unless you do the dialectic to dreams. So there's three uses of the dialectic. Perfect the truth, purify the false, and understand your guide, your dreams. Actually, there's four, because you're not part of the tradition of Diotima to Socrates to you unless you are sharing it. Create content, use your voice. And what are you sharing? You're making your own anime? All of the characters in drama, just like a dream, will reflect metaphysical principles and the principle of what a soul has to go through all these stages to perfect his wisdom, Odysseus, and remove his ignorance, Achilles. So it goes all the way back to Homer, 800 BC, before even. So you're becoming like the Dream Master. So four uses of the dialectic: perfect the truth, purify the false, understand for your dreams needed for both, and to share it with others. So that would be the full meaning of life, or the perfection of the art we're here to master, the art of understanding. So what was the joke? The joke was, whatever level you're at, it's funny because people will cross their arms and say, oh no, that's not understandable. Well, you don't know enough people. Read the Parmenides. Read the book we're reading, Socrates and Jesus. It's all understandable, pal. In principle. That's the difference between the dog whisperer and the dog nanny. The dog whisperer was able to solve all dogs' problems. Caesar Milan, he was great. He had success on TV, and the British did a version called the dog nanny. She was able to solve some dog problems, but she sucked. Some dogs, she said, they're just not solvable. And she said they have to be euthanized. Fuck her for euthanizing dogs by saying because she doesn't understand how to help them, no one does. Punishment is fucked. Punishment is just a demonstration that you have not yet understood what kind of wisdom is needed to purify ignorance. Now, the way she acts when she says, no one can understand this dog, we have to euthanize the dog, reflects her very problem. Because she's wrong, in principle, where did she learn this shit? Imitation. We all grow up in the world of becoming. We all grow up in the world of becoming. The world of physical experiences where you never see holes. You infer holes with your mind. So here is our whole and part model Venn diagram. Our mind can exist here, but in the physical world, shapes and colors, you infer the whole. You infer a fake model of the whole from your family, parents, or parental surrogate's way of being. That's your model of what it means to be knowing. Your model is that. Your activity is based on that model. That's the dog nanny. Now, in a just world or in a rational society, we would recognize that, and we wouldn't punish her the way she punishes dogs. We would ask her questions to reflect on that state of certainty, because we have talked to enough people to know that every stage of development, they claim it's the end. Otherwise, they wouldn't be stuck there. They'd keep going. That's the joke. Really? Oh, that's the end? No one understands that? What about you? Oh, well, he's wrong. I understand that. Yeah, of course he's wrong. What about this? No, I don't understand. That's unknowable. All right, what about you? Yeah, well, I know what he thinks is unknowable. Interesting. I wonder why he's so certain that it's unknowable, seeing as you know it. Hey, by the way, second guy. That third guy knows what you said you can't know. Two responses. Curiosity. Wow, I'm going to learn from that guy. Or sadism. I'm going to kill that guy. Kill him, mock him, exile him, threaten him. This is the nature of human savagery and injustice. A blind ignorance or loyalty to a false model of certainty that responds to new information with cruelty and even murder. That's belief. That's why it's the cause of human problems. No different from the Emma's Majority Report Twitch chat.
Please end kink shaming on your show.
That needs to end kink shaming on a show. Instead of asking me questions about what they didn't understand, they decided, let's just kill him anyway, ban him, exile him anyway. It's always the same. Always the same. Some scientist disagrees with Trump, kill the scientist. Some reporter disagrees with his best friend, that Saudi king, kill the journalist. Someone posts a meme Trump doesn't like, send him to Guantanamo Bay or Alligator Alcatraz or the other concentration camps that these Nazis are setting up in America. Always the same, always the same, always the same. Now, it can be funny when you've seen it enough. Now, what we are seeing is the reality is in principle intelligible, which means both understandable and experienceable. What we are also seeing is there seems to be three levels: the whole that transcends parts, the whole of all parts, and the parts in opposition to the whole. So just as there is a model of belief and an activity of materialism in the lower, or any sort of rejection of mind and self, there's also a model, the logos as a whole, knowing or nous, and the activity, understanding. We are wondering about what kind of model is the whole without parts, and what kind of activity would it have? Those are the questions we have at the moment, because Socrates says, hey, you know what? If we can personify ignorance or belief human problems with Jesus as a historical figure that's, represents belief, we can use a philosopher like Socrates to model wisdom, because philosophy means the study of or the love of wisdom, which is both the model and the activity. Is there a third category? A new age of man? A new class of being? What would its model be, and what would its activity be? From what we have seen so far already, we have understanding that can look down to purify the ignorant by the dialectic, ask them questions, a series of ordered questions that encourage self-reflection to find the root model of your own personal beliefs and cause of your problems. You can do what we're doing today, reflect on the model, which is the archetype for spirituality. It's the spiritual method. It's the greatest spiritual method because it incorporates understanding while others don't. So you can reflect on the model, which gives you an excellence of the activity and can open your mind for the direct experience, enlightenment. Again, if you've been told your whole life there is no such thing, that can be angering, that can be confusing, and your response will be to attack or kill that person who's saying it. That's belief. That's the savagery of human conditions in belief. We want to encourage curiosity. Curiosity can break through that garbage. Hey, if you're a basketball player and you think you're top shit, and then Michael Jordan shows up in your town, you could be the you know, the Hollywood movie, the teen movie, bully that says, "We don't want you in this town, Michael Jordan. You suck." And then they, you know, they throw beer at him at a party or whatever. Or you could be like, "Holy fuck, Michael Jordan's here. I want to learn from him and become a great basketball player myself." That's the two options to what we're doing here. Ban me from the Twitch chat. Huge beef with Emma right now.
I've been a bad little girl.
It's been bad. Twitch Beefgate 2025.
Whore.
I wouldn't say that.
You have the brain of a child if you think that.
Okay, maybe I should say that then. I don't want to have a brain of a child. So those are the two options. Become curious or shut it down. Now, if you are curious, you might recognize the way you shut it down, and that's the clues you need to solve the puzzle of why you're stuck in your own problems. Have you noticed the repeating problems, the same kinds of problems in your relationships, in your work, in your play, in your study, in your whole life? The state of mind when you shut down the logos gives you clues about your fake model that you are imitating and have been imitating your whole life. When Trump called the reporter a shut up little piggy. Little piggy? What the fuck?
Like literally, suck my dick, dude.
Come on, dude. Literally.
Talking about a bunch of slop.
Talking about a bunch of slop. Where do you think little piggy came from? That's a weird thing to say. So the idiosyncratic, or the your characteristic, or idiosyncrasies, the particular words and the way it feels. How did it feel when you told that reporter to shut up, little piggy? Where did you feel it in your body? Notice, we're not punishing him. We're encouraging to reflect on his false model that's the cause of his ignorance and harm. Where did you feel it in your body? So, questions about two things fundamentally: your state of mind and your words. Ousia, logos. It's always those two things. State of mind as a whole, and you're functioning through the parts. Whole, part, mind, activity. Knowledge, understanding, model, activity. So, and that's why it's funny. Because being in this game for a long time, you'll find lots of people at various levels, either in the physical world or in the metaphysical world. And whatever level they're at, they'll say, no, that's not knowable. The next level is not knowable. And it's funny because quite often there've been people at that same meeting who said the same thing about their state, but also the way that they say it's unknowable reflects their very problem. So if they were curious enough, they could benefit, but they're more attached to being certain, which is the issue. If we weren't addicted to that certainty, we wouldn't have a problem. So even that addiction to certainty, that's saying you can't understand other races. My dad said so, and he said it like this. The blacks are just that. Really? What was it like when you applied for that job? Oh, I didn't actually apply in the end. You didn't apply in the end? No. I didn't. But I thought you wanted that job. Yeah, but I wouldn't have got it anyway. What do you mean you wouldn't have got it anyway? You can't have a manager job. Notice you said you can't have that thing the same way your dad said, the same way you said you can't understand black people. The same block, the same model, the same activity, the same logos. Means problems are understandable, pal. Let me keep going with the chat. Socrates wouldn't say doctor, he'd say midwife. Right, well, both. You are midwifing them because you are helping them give birth to their ideas. So doctor is an analogy. So analogy is you take a lesser example as a doctor purifies the illness of the body, so to a philosophical midwife or a dialectician applied to the fake model heals your illness of psyche. But of course, once you've fixed your broken arm, you're still not excellence. You have to go to a personal trainer or do a sport or something to go from sickness to health. Therefore, philosophical midwifery is sickness to health. Sorry, you go to a trainer to get excellence. So philosophical midwifery is the dialectic applied to removing problems, sickness. Philosophy proper is the dialectic applied to perfecting truth. Dream analysis is the dialectic applied to dreams. Mythology is sharing your creation through the dialectic of the dialectic to others. So what the heck is this then? What is the dialectic or the way of activity applied to not the model of understanding, but its cause, the model of self? Because that might be this new way of being that Socrates is saying is ready to come to be. That puts all other ones to shame, that dooms all other ones. Chatty chat, is this Pierre Grimes? Right, yes, so the book we're reading is from Pierre Grimes, yes. So it took us 2,500 years to have this kind of reflection, because that's as long as it took for someone to rediscover philosophical midwifery, address their own personal false beliefs that block your ability to read and understand without interpretation, allowing there to be a person to read and understand Socrates without interpretation, because he had the dialectic. So after we killed Socrates, we lost philosophical midwifery. Recreating philosophical midwifery, discovering, well, allowing him to read Socrates for the first time in 2,500 years. But also discovering that the perfection of both you need dream analysis for, and by the way, realizing Homer did the same thing. Achilles is the worst possible person who goes through dream analysis and midwifery to remove his problem. And fortunately, we didn't kill the guy, so he was able to do that final thing, share it, which is the book we're reading. And therefore, the next person in the lineage is you, smiley face. That's you. Again, this is true for everyone. It's not opinion, it's just understanding. I said just understanding. It's awesome.
I love this guy.
I love this guy. To engage in the dialectic is to entertain becoming as a reality. Well, it's a kind of reality. Like, there is a kind of existence of the physical world. It's just not ultimate. Well, not greater. This is wrong. The pre-Socratic Parmenides and the book of Parmenides are completely different. Okay, so another difficulty is the way Parmenides has been translated up until like the last 20 years has been garbage. Why? Because all of the translators will still have their own personal pathologos that blocks their own understanding and causes them to project their own beliefs. That's why it took us so long to listen to Socrates. So only a translator who has gone through dream analysis and philosophical midwifery to uncover his false beliefs that he doesn't even know he has, that causes his projection and blindness, interpretation, projecting what's not there, being blind to what is there. Only a translator like that will be able to translate Parmenides. Why? Because to remove your problems, you can't just be looking at your problems. You also have to have your nose in a book written by Socrates or Pierre Grimes. Why? Because those are people who are masters of the logos. In other words, you can say, well, I'm becoming a vet. Why? Because I'm looking at all of the false beliefs I learned about animals when I was a kid. My mummy said that cats are girls and dogs are boys, and cats marry dogs. And I've gone to a lot of effort of doing philosophical midwifery on those false beliefs, therefore I'm going to be a vet. Hang on a second. Removing your false beliefs isn't the same as learning the skill. You got to do both. In fact, if you're not learning the skill, you might go through your whole life with that false belief and never have a reason to bring it to light and a reason to challenge it, which also means challenging your dear mummy and daddy and your family way of being, which requires courage and character.
This guy had to admit that the people in his life who helped convince him to be a conservative in the first place, parents, clergy, other authority figures, were wrong. Not only was wrong, and that he fell for it. All of that takes so much courage and character.
So you need courage and character to challenge your earliest teachers, meaning you have to, for us to perfect ourselves as souls, you need a doctor of read the handbook or be in the reading a book like veterinary science, but for the soul. And who's a master of veterinary science? Well, he wrote the textbook. You want to be a mechanic? Listen or read a book written by a master mechanic. What are we doing? Perfecting the logos, meaning we need to listen to a master of the logos. Who have we got? Parmenides, Socrates, Pierre Grimes, Diotima, Xenophanes, and Homer. That's our lineage. It's our lineage. Homer in 800 BC, Xenophanes. We don't have much written by Xenophanes. Only the passage, it's the whole self that's one, and it's the whole that is seeing, hearing, and thinking right now. Pretty cool, but not really enough to develop much on. He taught Parmenides. Parmenides gave us the dialectic, outlining all possible ways of thinking, how they're within a whole, a ranked system, and also demonstrating the dialectic in the highest possible way. And said, hey, you won't reach truth without the dialectic. Diotima said, hey, by the way, if you do reach truth, that's not the end, pal. When you reach the truth, you are reaching the model of mind itself or beauty itself or truth, but you need to go from the greater, the truth, to the true to develop true excellence. So there's two models or two kinds of spiritual enlightenment. And by the way, the use of loving or desiring that beauty itself and marrying it with understanding, love and logos, is actually the model for all human relationships. It's the ideal for human relationships, love and logos. Socrates came along and said, that's all fine, but you won't be able to do that without dreams. And then we killed him, and then we lost midwifery and dream analysis with Plato. And we had some but he did start the academy, so we had some metaphysics. Proclus, Plotinus, and Damascius made improvements on the dialectic, and then Emperor Justinian killed everyone and shut down understanding in 529 AD. Aristotle was a student of Plato. He had a block to even metaphysics, so no midwifery, no dream analysis, but we had metaphysics, or the dialectic applied to truth. But he had a block even to that. Materialism. And of course, without midwifery and dream analysis, Plato wasn't able to help Aristotle remove his block, so he was kicked out instead. So it's the union of religious thought from Emperor Justinian, who began the Dark Ages, and Aristotle's problem, materialism, that has come together in modern education. That's where we are. That's our culture. Materialism, which creates the conditions for its model, belief. So the establishment left reject any meaning or whole principles, so that the fascist believers of the right take over and enact their tyranny of their imitation of their own parents' ignorance. But there was this guy named Pierre Grimes who came along and rediscovered midwifery by working with alcoholics, curing alcoholism, allowing him to be free from his own beliefs to read Socrates, the original Greek, And also his friend was going through, and he also discovered the dream analysis and saw Homer was talking about that. So now he brought this whole tradition back. So Homer, Xenophanes, Palm and Diotima, Socrates, and then him. The translator. So if you're going to read anything by Plato, make sure it's a 1 Balboa translation. He's the only translator who has gone through dream analysis and midwifery sufficiently to be able to translate properly. If you compare his translations of Plato to anyone else's, you'll see how crazily bad the other ones are. So, if you read a Balboa translation of Parmenides, you will see Parmenides very differently than how you're taught within modern academia or Aristotelian Christian tradition. Learning does not end and will not eliminate the world's problems. Right. Can you see how you saying, I don't understand human problems, no one can understand problems? Do you see how that would block you from understanding human problems? Number one. Number two, if there was someone who does understand human problems and they're standing right in front of you, this kind of certainty would block you from listening to them. Number two. Number three, the more that person says, oh, by the way, that's wrong, here is the understanding, can you see how that may trigger an anger? Number four, if you were a young kid developing your own love of understanding and you're doing very well on your own, and your parents, who you were dependent on because you're a fucking child, came in and shut you down, which was an injustice to you and your development, can you see how you might be pissed off about that event? Number six. If you have suffered a block to your learning, which was an injustice you suffered, that as the cause of your anger, and you don't know what you're angry about, and someone comes along to challenge that way of being that you had to adopt to survive your family, can you see how you maybe not you, maybe someone else, you or someone else may get angry at that challenge to your way of being, but really it's a projection of the anger of that root event. In other words, we're all angry. We're all angry because we suffered an injustice. That injustice was a blocking of the self, mind, and logos. Stage. Logos, understanding 3. Knowledge 2. Self 1. So belief has to block those 3. If you understand, you wouldn't believe mummy, daddy, minister, rabbi, the guy in the funny hat. If you knew it, well then of course you wouldn't have to believe, you know it yourself. And if it's the self, do you have to believe anyone you have a self? Therefore, our problems stem from that root condition where we suffered an injustice against our own development of understanding, knowing, and self. That's our anger. Instead of addressing it through philosophical midwifery and dream analysis, but again, you won't surface the blocks unless you're also doing philosophy. So you have to be doing all of them. You can't just remove your problems. You have to be doing something to surface your problems. So you need to be reading a Balboa translation of Socrates or anything by Pierre Grimes, because those are two, masters of the logos. In order to surface your blocks to the logos, that's why we read that here on this channel. And the board is lagging. That will give you what you need to surface your blocks, your certainty, your anger. I know better than anyone else, blah, blah, blah. That becomes the material for philosophical midwifery, the dialectic applied to removing the false. Your dreams will guide you in both, but also you have to be sharing it too. Sharing it. Mythology. So, it's just there. That's just it. There's the map. But the human issue is, first of all, we're humans. In other words, if this is the solution to human problems, but we who have to learn it are humans, and the solution to human problems is the Logos, but human problems are problems because it blocks the Logos, we are fucked. It's a catch-22. Our blocks block the Logos is what removes the blocks. It's impossible. Parmenides said this. He said to Socrates, I used to have a quote for this. Actually, I'll read out the quote. I can summarize it. He says, look, unless you do this work, both mastering the dialectic and removing your blocks, even the best dialectician in the world could be walking you through the steps, but it won't convince you of anything. That's the biggest thing you have to be on guard for. Certainty. So what do? Catch-22. You do it anyway. That's courage. Do it anyway. You keep an open mind. You look for questions. You seek wonder. You try and get inspired by other people. You look for beauty. You try and create beauty. You seek all of these ideals of excellence anyway, and you keep going. You keep going. You read Pierre Grimes or a Balboa translation of Plato, and you keep going. You take notes about all of your certainty or your negative self-talk, your inner critic, and how it feels. Not just the words, but the feelings. And you find someone else in the game of mastering the dialectic, being a good person, and you go through midwifery with them. And you'll get help from your dreams. It's the only way forward. If you're not doing this, you could have Socrates standing in front of you. You could have Michael Jordan standing in front of you. And your reaction would be, you think you're better than me. I'm gonna fucking hang you. As every fascist has said to anyone who challenges them with understanding. Which is the cause of the beef with the majority report. Total shit show, because instead of learning, they went to their ignorance. I don't understand this. I'm going to use my power over you to silence you. Majority report. You'd think that would be the one channel on Twitch and YouTube that wouldn't do that, seeing as their whole thing is speaking out against that way of being, fascism. It's almost like there is something that they need to learn that is the next step, which is nothing other than recognizing the reason why there's such a great group of people who are doing such great things is because they are doing understanding. The next thing they have to realize is the root cause of all of the injustices they've been dealing with is belief. And they are at that level. They're at that level where they've recognized that, or they're very close to recognizing that. Then they have to say, okay, what is understanding? What's the model so that we can reflect on it? Number two, what is the model of belief that's the cause of human problems? You can report on problems for a long time, and it's worth doing, and they're good people for doing it. But there'll come a time where they're going to say, well, look, I am fucking sick of it. Too many people have been murdered by fascists. Christian, Nazi, nationalist fascists. Too many brown people have been raped and murdered by these fucking Gestapo thugs. Let's solve the problem. It'll come a time where that will happen. That's the time I'm waiting for. Because then I'll say, excuse me, I was banned from chat. Can I be unbanned so I can ask you some questions that will help you take the next step? Not selling anything. Not a cult member. By the way, your moderators called me both a grifter and a cult member for agreeing with you. I wonder why that happened. Could it be we are human beings in human problems, all of us, and unless we wake the fuck up and understand the model of human problems and human excellence, we will be a slave to that blindness. That was the cause of Beefgate 2025. It broke the internet, some are saying. Some are saying it went viral.
Freaks.
Freaks are saying that. But we're missing a term. Missing a term. We have being, which is that Venn diagram of whole and part connecting with each other. We have becoming, the physical world where we only see parts. We infer wholes. You only see the front of the chicken. You infer it has a butt. You just, oh, it's probably a whole chicken. Here's his butt. Gasp. But then what is that? Oops. What's that section of the Venn diagram that is the whole that has no parts? In other words, if being is experienced with mind turning upon itself, as we are doing through time, as the method for awakening that experience called Usia. Usia is the nature and the model. What kind of self-knowingness is its cause? Or in other words, if mind knows itself, what's the cause of that? If this is a oneness, what's the cause of that? Or who's experiencing it? And if there's something experiencing the ultimate positive qualities, see, that's our understanding. See? Our friend who had the brilliant light of being experience, ultimate infinity and ultimately self-contained. All the greatest whole with the greatest parts. It's the positives of both. What's the cause of that? Or who's experiencing that? And if you're experiencing the greatest qualities, can you have a quality? Or would that quality get in the way for your ability to experience qualities? In other words, if you're wearing rose-tinted glass, no, if you're wearing like a blue glasses, you won't be able to see yellow. You'll only see green because it will affect your ability to perceive. In other words, what we're asking for is there the experiencer of all qualities that is itself transcending qualities, cause and effect. The cause has to be greater than the effect. And if the greatest experience is those positives, what must the cause be? And is that the new way of being that Socrates is talking about in the book we're reading? Which means we need another term. We have our self pairs that allow us to understand. We have our self ones that talk about the desirability of our different levels. We want it because it's beautiful or it's fair or just, it's goodness, it brings a benefit, it's our excellence, it's real. But what we're saying is, hang on a second, there is the lesser, the false belief based on physical parts or appearances. There is the greater, the truth about justice and beauty. That's the model for all gurus and politicians in a rational world. But we said, hang on a second. In analogy, there's a lesser, Socrates as the student, to the greater. But a mean analogy shows that, hang on a second, as Diotima taught Socrates, so too Socrates is teaching us. And by us participating in greater, lesser, we bring the teaching to a whole, we bring a wholeness, we bring the extremes, Diotima and us. We live thousands of years apart, but we become a whole. And we become like Diotima was if we master the logos, master the dialectic. We can function the same as her because now we can teach someone else. Whole, same, likeness. These are all the greater of these pairs together as one idea. So in other words, it's lesser greater something, lesser greater whole. Yeah, well, you can't say whole because we're already using whole as whole and parts. Whole as defined by no part missing, and part is defined by a part of a whole. They're interconnected definitionally, but we're not talking about whole in that way. We're talking about whole of logos or of the tradition. And same, yeah, we're the same as Diotima, but we've already got same and different. Same defined by nothing different, and different defined by its opposite, its pair, lesser and greater. Likeness as well. So this idea needs a new word that talks about the greatest of the pairs together as a single idea. What's that word? Because our question today, what is understanding? Would it be a complete understanding if we're missing one of the terms? By the way, this applies to all things in experience, perception, existence, and dreams. And dreams, different color. Because dreams use these. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Socrates says you need to be doing dream analysis. Well, here's the thing. Would we be even asking this question if we did not desire? Be motivated by some sort of desire for oneness with our understanding? In other words, is there a part of our psyche that seeks to understand things? Reason? Plan? Does that motivate us to learn? To figure things out? By the way, the things that we think are worth figuring out. Do we focus on them because we think that they are good? They bring us a goodness? Do we desire things that are good for ourselves? Does that motivate us? Do we seek beauty? Do we think it's good for things to be just and fair? The anger, that's the root, a root indicator of our problems, that cause our problems, a projection of the anger of the injustice we suffered. Is it an anger at an injustice? So we want justice? Do we want our excellence because there's a goodness that we get from it? So these single terms are words that are the building blocks or pieces of goodness that we seek. By the way, we won't be able to get it unless we understand it, so we better use these things to bring the parts into a whole for understanding, to understand what is the same and what's different, what's the same as the model so we can help, what's different so we can not just solve political problems, but recognize the cause of human problems, the differences. So these pairs are the class of Lego pieces of understanding that are under the category of oneness or understanding. Oneness in terms of what they seek, and understanding the type of desire within our psyche. By the way, when we do seek that goodness, we have to understand how to reach it, so these two come together. But do we want something fake? Do we want to be conned? Or do we want the real thing? When we seek our goodness and seek to understand how to reach that goodness, are we ultimately seeking truth in our outward motion? By the way, to learn about the truth, do we need some sort of teacher? Like Diotima? And then from Socrates to us, so we can learn the truth about reality, the truth about goodness, the truth about beauty from Diotima. So now we've got these three. A misuse of these pairs, like materialism, belief, or even worse, nihilism, rejecting both, gives us not beauty, but ugliness, not justice, but injustice, fascism, tyranny. Not benefit, but will destroy the whole fucking world and our species. But if we embrace understanding, which includes this reflection on the model of understanding, we can understand and experience the model of justice. The truth of beauty, which will provide us a goodness and can benefit ourselves in the world. And the greater we reflect with understanding on the model of understanding, we perfect our excellence. So one is the lesser, one is the greater. Why is it under the category of truth? Because the lesser version of those monads that are a misuse of these duads is called lying. Believers, religious authorities, political figures, especially the right wing, are lying to us. That's not a bombshell. We all know that every religion except for yours is lying to their people. Every parent who disagrees with your parents are lying to their children. Every political figure, well, even politicians, we know that even the ones that are your team, you'd have to be, okay, there are some MAGA fanatics who say, oh, Trump's never lied ever. But we know that these are the kinds of people who lie, and we don't like it. Unless, of course, it's a kind of lie that reflects your own family, in which case you'll paint your pickup truck in the colors of the American flag, and then you'll, I don't know, wear a red hat. And you'll cover your face and you'll kidnap brown people off the street and then murder them. ICE. In other words, lesser, greater in terms of truth. But we've recognized that it's this Venn diagram here of the world of being it's the realm of being that gives us the model of understanding and truth, which is where we experience, hey, the whole of justice has to account for all the parts. You can't be a just world unless you see everyone the same to create the best kind of excellence, a way of being for all human beings that are the same, but the best, so the greatest kind of sameness. Recognizing every life matters. Yeah, and I don't mean every life matters in terms of Black Lives Matter, the way that believers or fascists say, well, every life matters, as a way to discount the Black Lives Matters movement. That's stupid. That issue of belief that is attacking people because they can only be different needs to be addressed. But also, every life has dignity, every life has honor, every life is here for a reason or meaning. We are understanding what specifically it is. It's not just a random principle or ethos that we hope left-wing politicians pick up. We are fucking nailing it down. So you don't have Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Fetterman type fucking grifters who can come along and say, well, I have a different opinion. Fuck you and fuck your opinions. This is not an opinion that all life has meaning. It's an understanding of why all lives have meaning. We are all the same self, with participating in the same mind, with the same purpose of life to master our highest functioning understanding, with the same moral imperative to reflect on our false beliefs and remove the cause of our own injustice and ignorance, and the same higher goal to perfect our understanding and become gurus. That's the highest sameness, self, mind, logos, understanding. But it accounts for all differences because you will all have a different false belief. There are thousands of different religions, but there are as many different pathologos false beliefs as there are human beings. Sameness and accounting for all differences. But we have to embrace differences in our own particular characters. There are some people who are lovers of understanding on this very platform who are much more charming and beautiful and charismatic and funny than I am. Doesn't mean my life isn't got any value. There are going to be some people who are hopefully get into my content, but they're probably going to be more get into other people's. That's fine. Doesn't mean I need to be killed or put in prison. By the way, do all societies that participate in evolution have to account for differences because evolution is what's the definition of evolution? Natural selection from genetic mutation, or allowing for differences and allowing the best differences to rise to the surface. So sameness and difference as the true model of justice that needs to be nailed down. Let me say it again. Nailed down. This is the universal principles that the Majority Report have been aching for and saying we should have. This is it. It's called the Logos. I can't tell them because I'm banned from their chat for saying this very thing and agreeing with them. Beefgate 2025. Some say it broke the internet.
Freaks.
All checks out.
But everything I say all checks out. So, we got the truth of justice. The truth of the model of these monads. But where the heck does this model that incorporates all parts into a oneness come from? For there to be the truth of the model of justice as a oneness, there has to be this level here. This part here. In other words, we need three terms for truth. We need the false or the lesser, we need the greater, and we need this third mysterious term that we've said seems to be all of these, but in a new kind of a way. Whole, same, like, etc. Because as we are reading in the book, this seems to be what Socrates is pointing to as the new way of being. That's better than all others and will doom all lesser forms of being. The new category of man. Greater than wisdom, greater than ignorance. that even Socrates and Jesus will become followers of. We've seen that we can understand human ignorance by taking this lesser term of the triad, applying it to the monads to recognize what badness is, the opposite of this, injustice, ugliness, badness, harm, and then tying it to these duads or pairs to understand, so we understand the cause of the goodness while understanding the goodness by applying this to lesser. In other words, the lesser version of those monads defines goodness, badness. The greater from this set of threes applied to the set of ones, or the greater version of truth applied to goodness, defines our excellence, or the truth of excellence. It's right there in the thing. So yeah, this whole reflection on these words are going to be using these words. That's what understanding is. So we have fun here.
Where's the joy? Where's the whimsy? Where's the childlike one?
We have fun.
4 trillion people are still going to listen to this.
And that's good that they're all listening, because they'll all have fun too. For there to be a oneness, for there to be a goodness, for there to be a truth, logically, rationally, necessarily, for always and forever, there has to be the principle of one, to bring all of the parts into the greatest whole, a oneness. For these to be the goodnesses that we can experience that puts an end to the badnesses, there has to be a principle of good, so that the greater participates in it, but the lesser doesn't. For there to therefore be these distinguishing levels of reality, and to our friend in chat, kinds of existence, yes, eternally belief doesn't exist, but in this society, it has a kind of existence in time that causes suffering. It's not existing in terms of a real being, it's the opposite of being, it's the lesser. So we've got categories of existence, or if you want to be fancy, ontology, what exists. But again, we are, even though nihilism isn't real, it exists for the person who believes it for as long as they do. So just because nihilism doesn't really exist, it's not a true principle, doesn't mean we should be ignorant of it. We need to recognize nihilism where it fits in the order of cognitive function, because even knowledge, this doesn't even exist. If you are saying pure existence, this exists eternally, but it has to have a cause. That means this, whatever that is going to be even greater. So are you going to reject wisdom? Yeah, materialism and belief are lower cognitive functionings that we call ignorance. Well, that is called ignorance and is the cause of our problems. But what are we going to ignore it? Let the fascists end human civilization? So what are we doing? We're recognizing levels of cognitive development, cognitive functions, and levels of existence that you can participate in. But our question is, what's the best one? What's the real one? See, we're struggling. We need a word that doesn't mean the greater, the model of justice and beauty, truther. We need a word that means this. And we can take it from the names of the categories that underline these understanding sets of, you got you're putting away your Lego pieces of understanding. You've got a box for all of your three bump, your 3 bump blocks. You've got a box for your 1 bump blocks, and you've got a box for your 2 bump blocks. These are the categories or units of thought, reality, everything you've perceived and experienced and stuff. It's the model of understanding. It's the model of truth. But we need a word that applies to this. And already, just by using the analogy, we see it's whole but not whole in parts. It's same but not same and different. It's you're like Diotima, but no one in this thing is unlike each other. We're all like each other. And we don't mean like in that there's no one unlike. It's a different use of these words. This mean analogy of the teaching shows us there is a necessity for a new category of words. That it seems to be all of these, greater of the pairs, but defined differently from the way they are used here, defined by their opposites. It's not a whole because no part is missing. Like there could still be a whole teaching if I wasn't born. Not like I'm a necessary part, but whole defined by missing parts is over here. There's no one different in this, but we're the same. There's no unlikeness in our states of mind by participating in this, the truth of teaching. What is that word we're looking for? If this is the greatest model, being, and this is the lesser, false, ignorance, what's this? Now, this has been our question. We need a new word. Well, I'm going to use the word ultimate. If this is that's false about reality, ignorance. If this is the truth about reality, this is ultimate reality, ultimate excellence, ultimate benefit, ultimate beauty, ultimate justice. Another way we could define the ultimate, the one, the true, the good, and what did we say earlier makes everything meaningful? The self. The self. Transcending being, transcending becoming as the necessary cause of both. It's not the greater, it's not the lesser. It uses all these terms but in a new way. Let's use the word ultimate. Therefore, we can distinguish the two spiritual experiences, the penultimate one, the brilliant light of being, as this penultimate or second last, but also the ultimate. Oh yeah. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. All right. I think we might be onto something. So, earlier in the book, Socrates defined the brilliant light of being as the penultimate state of being. And I have been carrying that word because it sticks out. So you have some fun, you keep it, you play with it, have fun with it. But why was that word so weird? Why use the word penultimate? I joked about getting applauses at coffee shops for like the last, I don't know, 40 episodes since we heard it. Well, that's the penultimate. Here's the thing. We can understand materialism, strict dualism. We can understand belief, conflict with the greater. We can understand understanding, knowing the whole, being able to beneficially relate to the parts. We can understand knowledge, the greatest whole of the greatest parts, but then what then is this? Seems to be defined by this Venn diagram as the positive, but not positive, because it's not the greatest whole, because the greatest whole would be defined by its opposite. The greatest whole would be, therefore, the whole that incorporates the greatest parts. The greatest kind of sameness for the idea of justice for society would incorporate the greatest differences. We're not after that. It can't be the greatest whole defined by the greatest parts, because literally it's the greater term whole that's not touched by the parts. In other words, it transcends greater and lesser, allowing us to see that that triad of terms, lesser, this one, lesser, greater, applies to this middle term. It can't be greater. Greater is in comparison to lesser. But for there to be a greater and lesser, or this principle of analogy or growth or learning, there has to be a principle that defines greater. Why is greater greater than lesser? Oh, greater is greater than lesser because it's better. What do you mean by better? I mean greater. So greater is greater than lesser because it's greater. Yeah. Well, no, greater is greater than lesser because it's closer to excellence. But what do you mean by excellence? Greatness. Greatness. Greater is greater than lesser because it's closer to greatness, is what you're saying. Yeah. And greatness meaning what? What's greater than everyone else? You say that Michael Jordan is the greatest because everyone else is less than him. But then one day there'll be another basketball player who will redefine greatness, I suppose. Right, so greatness is defined by lesser. But what makes greater greater? Without using the word greatness. Closer to what? Closer to the truth? How about closer to the ultimate? The principles that define greater and why greater is greater than lesser, so that there can be a greater than lesser. The principles for oneness, goodness, or truth is the ultimate. The one, the good, the true. And while all of these terms in every other experience is defined in relation to its parts, we say it's enlightenment because it's the greatest whole, and we can define why it's the greatest whole because it literally incorporates every part of reality all at once. You can know that with mind. That's a thing. That's an experience. It kicks ass. And you fall in love with it. That's why it's called philosophia. Love that experience of wisdom. That's the definition of wisdom. But as we said, there's a different kind of whole that has nothing to do with parts. And now, because we've laid it out in a diagram, we can understand why that has to be true. For there to be a principle of whole and part that are different, there has to be something that is part that doesn't touch the whole. If they overlapped, then the part wouldn't be lesser. It would be greater than the greater. because it would have all that section of part that doesn't reach whole, but it also reaches the top of whole, so it's even better. In other words, there has to be some part of part that's not whole and some part of whole that's not part for them to be two different things. Therefore, you can't define the wholeness of this whole in relation to parts, because it's not touched by parts. You can't define that sameness in relation to difference. So therefore, everything in experience is experience. Remember, this is not just understanding, it's our experience, our perception, our existence, and we experience it in dreams as well. Everything you've ever experienced, therefore, is these two things. The way, whole and part, same and different. Everything you've ever experienced. The way in which you experienced is either these one things, it's good or beautiful or just, or it's lesser imitation, badness, pseudo-justice, pseudo-beauty, ugliness, depending on how you use those two things. Are you a part in opposition to the whole? Well, you'll be a dick. You'll be unjust. The right wing and religion, and disbelief in principle. Have them together beneficially, justice, beauty. Everything you experience is there, the net result will be there, and the thing that distinguishes which of those net results you get is defined by these three words. It's either the lesser, injustice, ugliness, etc., the greater, or a different kind of whole that will be different than anything you've ever experienced. Transcending experience of wholes and parts necessarily, because it's the whole without parts. So how can you know something beyond any experience? Can't have any color, can't have any shape. Can't be out of time in that it comes in and out of time like being. Or it's being existing out of time as the cause of time. So it's not being defined by its cause of time. It's a different kind because it even causes being. Ultimate. Therefore, this new way of being that Socrates is pointing to, that even philosophers and believers, even Socrates and Jesus, would become followers of this way of being, we can call the ultimate way of being. Now we have that third term, we can solve the puzzle. Because we have the lesser version of this in our ignorance and belief, we have the greater version of this in knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. We now know what we're looking for. An ultimate justice, an ultimate beauty, an ultimate goodness we call the good. The ultimate oneness we call the one. The ultimate truth we call true itself. The principle for all of these things, most primarily our ultimate goal, which happens to be knowing the self. And as we go back through our lineage of time, from where we are, you reading this book written by PG, following Socrates, who learnt from Parmenides and Diotima, Parmenides learnt from Xenophanes, and all of them from Homer, starting the game. Know thyself. So, that's our goal, the first cause, and our final cause. We can understand why it's the final cause, because it's our ultimate. We can see what it's going to feel like, or why it's so good and worth seeking. Its ultimate justice, beauty, good, benefit, etc. The monads that we've been learning. So it's the highest term of the triad, applied to all of the monads or ones. and we can understand it. So our friend says, you can't understand being. Now, Parmenides would disagree. That's his second hypothesis. It's his longest one. It is a very lengthy, in-depth understanding of being. So that's easily solved. Yes, you can understand the brilliant light of being or spiritual experience. It's the second hypothesis of Parmenides. And if you read the Balboa version, you can actually read it properly. But the difficulty people say is, well, okay, normally when people will say, people who know enough about understanding and the logos know enough not to be materialists because they're using their mind. So it kind of makes no sense for them to say there's no such thing as mind, because you're into mind if you're into understanding. Often people get into philosophy because they've had an experience of being. So it would make no sense for them to say that there is no such thing as mind, or it's not understandable because they've come into philosophy because they've had an experience of pure mind or ousia, or the brilliant light of being, and they want to understand it because it was the most real, etc. All those monads. That's why it's called philosophy. Love it. You love it. You want to understand and get back there and incorporate it, etc., etc. So our friend in chat today said, oh, no, you can't understand this. Well, I mean, that happens. That happens. People, whatever level of understanding you're at, your block will say that's as far as you can go. But normally, the level where people say you can't understand that if they're already into philosophy is here. That's what they say is ineffable, or beyond language, or beyond categories, or beyond understanding. Why? Who says? Now, I'm joking a little bit because it is a puzzle. Because normally the categories of understanding are derived from experience, which has its limit as here, parts and whole. But we have seen from this Venn diagram that has to exist in principle for there to be anything that exists. For there to be difference themselves, you need a difference between whole and part. You need a difference between same and other, self and other, one and many. Meaning you need this section that's the whole without parts, you need this section which has the overlap, and you need this section which is human ignorance. Part that's not whole, difference that's not the same, many that can never be. By the way, imagine a bike that could never be whole. It'd be a shit bike. It would fall apart. Right? Parts that can't be whole. Imagine always running around, never being at rest. Motion without rest. That's belief. That's human problems. So this simple Venn diagram, which is nothing other than the principles of understanding that apply to truth, which we seek outwardly. 3 parts of the soul. We inwardly want our goodness. We want to eat a good sandwich. We want to make sure that what we seek in the world is true and we're not being conned. And we want to reason to understand how to do that. Reasoning, oneness, understanding. Outward seeking with courage to seek the truth. That's why you need courage in this game. Your false beliefs will feel true, but you stay in it anyway. To overcome the human catch-22 issue. Being a human being with human problems, having to learn how to solve them. You're in them. Courage. Seek the truth anyway. And you also do that because you desire goodness for yourself. You want to be good. You want to be beautiful. You want to help. You want to be happy. Each of those 3 categories of soul has a goal that they seek. Truth, goodness, understanding, or the one, the true, and the good. In other words, all roads head back to, not Rome, Greece. All roads lead to Greece, to Athens. All roads lead to the Logos. by recognizing that there are these building blocks of understanding, by doing nothing other than reflecting on what we used to think. That's it. Using understanding to reflect on the model of understanding, which is a principle. The more you're closer to the model, the more you perfect it and gain its excellence, and you can benefit. As true for skateboarding as it is for this. We've recognized that the use of this triad to these monads based on this use of duads or pairs defines ignorance. The use of this triad, greater, applied to these monads, goodness, are caused by this use of the pairs, whole and part together in a good way or in a whole way. Finally, the missing triad we've been after, that we wanted to use whole, but we can't use it because it's not that kind of whole. We wanted to use same, but it's not that kind of same. We wanted to use likeness, and we could even you could finish the rest. You do the rest. You have fun with it. It's on the board. Take the whole, take the greater of the pair, but define it in a different way, where it's not defined by its lesser opposite or lesser pair, but defined by this root analogy, mean analogy of unfolding. For there to be a teaching, Diotima has to unfold to Socrates, and Socrates has to unfold to us for it to be complete or whole or same or at rest, etc. For there to be a creation, it wouldn't be much of a self if it couldn't generate or create. But its creation would be pretty impotent if it couldn't create. Therefore, the principle that unfolds creation itself, well, whole and part, sure, beauty and goodness, so that the parts are distinguished in some way from the whole. It's less good, it's less excellent, but also ultimate, greater, and lesser. We need that triad for creation itself as well. We need the monads to distinguish the goodness and what we desire. We need the duads to logically create reality, and we need the triads for it to unfold through creation. Truth. So by linking it together, we can understand the spiritual experience as nothing other than these, we can understand what the spiritual experience is by taking these monads and applying it to this. That's what it is. We can understand it by seeing how the pairs relate. Equally so, we can find the definition of our ultimate goal, which would therefore be the new category of man as this applied to this. The same monads applied to the highest of that triad, ultimate. And hey, that's what we're seeking, our goodness. And that's how we know it's the final goal or our true goal. But we won't get there. We know we have the three parts of our soul. We want to eat a good sandwich, but we have to make sure we don't eat a fake sandwich, a plastic sandwich. So we've got to outwardly move, inwardly desire the goodness. We outwardly function to seek truth, not a virtual sandwich or a chat GPT sandwich. But we have to reason to make sure we do that, to plan how to get that, understand what is the good and the true. Therefore, our understanding or ones allow us to understand what that is. And there are only 6 primary terms, or pairs, 12 terms, 6 pairs. Bunch of onenesses and 3 primary terms of truth. That's how we know why it's worth seeking these monads. That it's our ultimate goal or rest because of ultimate in this triad. And now we have to understand what in the fuck is how do we get that? I shouldn't say what in the fuck. Sorry about my language.
Vapid cunt.
That's even worse.
You just blow in from Stupid Town.
Sorry about being
Whore
Stupid
much?
Town.
She's like a cold-hearted cunt.
Well, not me.
That's weird that you think that.
Okay, maybe I am then. I don't want to be weird. So now we can understand it, because understanding is this category, these duads, and what we are taking is a new definition of the wholes defined in a different way, not in relation to the parts. So in one way you could say as we were talking about some people who say, you can't understand this is beyond language. In one way, they're right. If you're defining your primary terms of language for understanding as these duads, which are defined by their opposite, a whole of all parts, then yeah, you can't apply these. So it's not that, not that, not that, not that. That sounds like nihilism. That's not going to work. But also, how are we going to reach our goal if we can't understand it? We have to redefine these greater terms and compare it to all other definitions of those terms, because the whole of this analogy isn't a whole of parts, a whole that's not missing its parts. You'd have Fred here. Oh, but you're missing Tim. Doesn't matter, still a whole. We become like Diotima. Then who's unlike? No one. So that's our ultimate term. Understanding the brilliant light of being or wisdom is necessary because it gives you the highest positives, the highest use of language in this way. To compare it from the truth use of these words, which is not based on the lesser or greater, it's the ultimate. The third category of these words, based on the mean analogy of unfolding and return. We've been using analogy all the way back to solve these puzzles to reach their goal. It's analogously like the brilliant light of being, but it's different because we need all of these words in one word. And we need a different definition for all of them in contrast to all experience, especially the brilliant light of being. So we can take all of these terms in a new way that's not the same as this, and we'll call it ultimate. Ultimate in that it takes all of them, but ultimate also implying not defined in the same way. So when someone comes along and says, well, you can understand the brilliant light of being, fine. But you can't understand its cause because it's beyond experience. It has to be beyond language. We would smile and say, you're kind of halfway right. But you've forgotten about the triad of truth. The false, the truth, and the true. The lesser, the greater, and the ultimate. Is there an ultimate use of words that's ultimate, not because it's the greatest use of words that you use to define the brilliant light of being? You can say that the brilliant light of being is understandable because it's the greatest use of words. It's the greatest use of words. It's the highest superlatives. Beauty itself, justice itself, etc. But can you use words in a non-dual way? Transcending dualism. What's another way of saying transcending dualism? One. Not two, one. You can benefit by having experienced wisdom and understanding it because you know where the reach of the highest use of words in that way leads you, and you can distinguish this use of words from it. So it can still benefit you, but don't get stuck there. The ironic tragedy of identifying self with this experience. The irony being it's the greatest experience, but the tragedy is it's not the self. And it's very attractive to think, well, I'm it. I've reached the end. I'm the next becoming of Jesus or whatever. Next coming of whatever. That's why necessarily for this kind of philosophy, let's just say dianoia, philodianoia. That's why love of understanding, philodianoia, is necessarily the one spiritual tradition. Because unless you have the logos, you won't have these building blocks to reflect with. If the only thing you're using to reflect on your spiritual development and experiences is your physical or is your personal experiences. In other words, you don't have this set of logos terms. You won't be able to recognize there is a cause for this because it's the greatest experience. If your metric is experience and use of words or understanding based on experience, how the heck will you posit there being a higher level of reality than the truth of reality? The greatest reality. Only with this kind of reflection can you therefore say, if that's the truth, there must be true as a principle. If this is oneness, there must be one. If this was goodness, there must be good. Or if this is the greatest experience possible, it ain't the end, because there is a third term in the triad category of selfers of the self logos. Therefore, in principle, we have come to the conclusion that this kind of reflection of understanding upon the model means that understanding is not just used for our perfection of understanding by reflecting on the model and the preparation for the experience of that penultimate experience of being. And also, it's the very thing you need to use in the dialectic to help remove our ignorance or solve human problems. But there is another use of understanding by understanding the model, realizing that there is this higher model of ultimate, true, one, good self. Without it, we can see from this reflection why that's the case. It's not because it's my team and yay my team, yay blue team, yay pink team, yay red team, yay Christians, yay Buddhists, yay Taoists, yay Tibetans, whatever. No. By understanding the limits of language use in relation to experience, here we can understand why you need understanding itself as the spiritual method, because it's the only method that will allow you to posit a reality greater than experience by definition. Only by using our understanding to reflect on the model of understanding to give us the things needed to make sense, why we want it to make sense, and how we can apply it to make sense in these different categories of truth, can we posit the existence of a third triad term, ultimate. Can we understand how to apply that ultimate, and can we understand what it is we'll reach with the monads? So our friend said, the realm of being, our friend in chat today said, this realm of being is not understandable. That allowed us to reflect on his state of mind of certainty and how, so he can gain clues into who he's imitating with that belief. We can ask him questions about what's like, how is he going to become a follower of this channel, or is he going to listen to what we're saying? How is his activity going to be if he stays stuck to that certainty model? And it allowed us to show how we could use the dialectic as a series of questions to ask him questions about that model to trace it back to his earliest scene. But before doing any of that, we have to show him that his opinion is not true. Now, he's not going to believe what we say because his belief is different. But rationally, if we say, oh yeah, by the way, it's the second hypothesis, you can read it, the understanding of the brilliant light of being. But you don't even have to read it. Look, it's just this. It's just the highest positives, and we gave a demonstration of what a dialectic with someone who's had that experience would be like. They talk about its goodness, or using one of these monads, it was reality, oh my God, or it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Now you're motivated. You need that motivation, that desire, that love. We showed how we could ask him questions. Talk about it. What does it feel like? States like. We're using like. He said it was infinity. We recognize it as unlimited. Therefore, we know the next question. Was it self-contained? What are we doing? We're proving or demonstrating to our friend in chat that his opinion or belief that the brilliant light of being is ununderstandable is not true based on his own understanding. Like, he can imagine this. And he can see, and he can follow along with the board. If he's in this chat, he's probably very intelligent, rare kind of a person. It's not going to feel true, and he's not going to be convinced, because as the oracle says,
The problem is that you can't reason someone out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into.
and the oracle's always right, we always know this. Always right. Because the oracle says, wait. Oracle
No,
says,
you're not the one that's mentally unwell. You're brave. You are crossing into new boundaries.
yes. And that feels true to me, and it's very nice, and I think that must be right. That's why the oracle is always right. Because she always
No,
says,
you're not the one that's mentally unwell. You're brave. You are crossing into new boundaries.
yes, that's why the oracle is the oracle. And the oracle says,
The problem is that you can't reason someone out of a position that they didn't reason themselves into.
you can't reason out of that position, but the reason is necessary for him to begin his reflection. Otherwise, I could be some fucking dope saying, oh, you disagree with me? Oh, let's talk about your childhood. No, fuck off. Maybe you're wrong. He said earlier, sorry, I haven't got caught up with the chat. If he's still around, I will, but let me know. I saw him mention utopia. So if someone comes along and says, you know what, mankind is a shit. We're all barbarians, and therefore, utopia is a pipe dream. I don't believe in utopia. And then you come along and say, well, actually, if in principle problems are solvable, then we could very much have a utopia. And he turns around and says, oh, that's interesting. Tell me about your childhood where you learnt this nonsense. Hang on a second. No. Philosophical midwifery, or the use of the dialectic to unpack the root cause of our problems, isn't an I win fucking button to an argument. In other words, you have to first demonstrate rationally why that position is limited. Then, if they agree, there's no problem. If it's not a true position, then also there's no problem. You have the fucking problem. You believing there's no utopia. That's the problem. How are you going to work towards a goal you don't think is possible, pal? So don't fucking midwife me with my truth or understanding. So demonstrating that the brilliant light of being is possible is what we did first. But if it still felt like, oh yeah, I can understand that, but it doesn't feel true, I'm going to walk away still with the beliefs I came into this argument with. Doesn't matter how colorful the board was or how funny the sound drops were.
She's like a cold-hearted cunt.
You'll get a bunch of views.
We'll get a bunch of views from the soundboard though.
I don't know, whatever.
But whatever. Doesn't matter. But I don't like that. I don't like that I'm tied to an ignorant position. I don't like that I can't evolve and grow. You're saying I could understand the brilliant light of being? That sounds fucking better than being ignorant of my greatest experience. By the way, if I can understand it, I can probably get back there again. And when I do get back, then I might not be freaked out like I was last time. And when my friends and family say I was an idiot, or it was just my brain chemistry, or I was just tripping, bro, I won't believe them and feel shit, because I understand it. I might even be able to integrate it into the dialectic like you just demonstrated. I would love to understand that thing I don't understand. I don't want to be a dog nanny. I want to be a dog whisperer. If that was his response to learning there is something he doesn't yet understand, Got a drop for that, I think.
So, like, not only have you been wrong on, like,
No.
is this chat?
No.
No, you're not the one that's
Wait.
mentally. Where's the joy? Imagine people changing their positions and
All right, don't
improving
worry.
for the better.
There's another. I took it off the soundboard. I need it. Okay, let me pause for a second. Here we go.
There's only two options at the end of an argument. One, you're wrong, but now you always get to be right about that topic going forward. So you got to learn something, which is always a plus. Or two, you're right and you get to revel in being right. It's a win-win-win-win-win.
That oracle drop. I'm open to learning something new that would benefit me, or
Imagine people changing their positions and improving for the better.
and improve for the better. Then you say, hang on a second, that is a clue, because the most important thing we can do is reflect on what blocks us from following reason and becoming better, because that's the cause of my ignorance, and that's what's preventing me from experiencing that, and that's causing my reincarnation into this life of Hades. My false image of myself is the cause of my problems and blocks, the cause of my injustice, the cause of my, if I ever have kids, I'll pass this bullshit onto them and hurt them in the same way I was hurt. And it's going to block my incarnation to higher dimensions and make me come back around on this shithole again. Hades. If that was his response to seeing somebody else understand something that he believes is not understandable, he is in a fantastic position where he's now open for philosophical midwifery, the greatest activity we can do here. By the way, that will maybe unlock greater depths of that same experience. As the 10 ox herding pictures of Chinese Buddhism shows us, there are stages. It's the same experience, but there are depths to that experience, of course. So having understanding as well as the experience is a
It's a win-win-win-win-win.
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 Win-win-win-win. Even. Okay, that's great. But the difficulty comes with this one. This one, to realize that there's even a level of reality beyond that, and that it is capable to be understood, that's usually the most challenging one. And it has to be, because if the pathologos blocks self-logos, and this is the highest expression of the logos, the self, and the highest activity of the logos to reflect on the self, it will block everyone. In other words, to even have been involved in this conversation to this point, you have to be either an exceptionally rare, amazing individual, or you've done a lot of work in philosophical midwifery and dream analysis, or both. Because it's going to be challenging as all fuck. By definition, because this is the ultimate goal, and blocks by definition block your goals, this is going to be the ultimate trigger. Which is why I have 0 people in my Twitch chat, and Asmongold has 50 fucking thousand. He ain't challenging anyone's shit. His whole business plan is to agree with the bullshit beliefs and opinions of the stupidest people. So there you go. For us, we're ahead. For us, though, we have a likely hypothesis of what exactly this new way of being is, why it's a challenge to everyone, even people who've had spiritual experiences. So even Tsunades and Jiraiya's and Master Roshi's, people, or Odysseus's, who have a level of this. And especially challenging to people who are materialists or believers. We've understood why, therefore, this love of dianoia, love of understanding, philodianoia, is necessarily the archetype or the highest principle of spirituality, because you won't be able to engage in this puzzle and use words or understanding in this ultimate way unless you have done this kind of reflection, which means you've read this book we're reading and had a practice in developing questions and a practice in practicing the dialectic to nail down those questions, because all these terms are the terms used in the dialectic. Without practice of the dialectic, we wouldn't have recognized what the duads were, what the ultimates are, what the monads are, and what the principle of analogy is, lesser, greater, and ultimate. And we needed all three to solve this puzzle. The ultimate version of these, by defining these higher terms, greater terms, but in a unique way where they're greater but not defined by the lesser, whole but not defined by the part. The greater can still be a kind of greater defined by the parts in this overlap of the Venn diagram, but there is a kind of whole here that is completely out of the parts. A new word, new use of language, an ultimate dialectic. Is that the highest activity of understanding? Is that the self reverting on the model of self? Is that the new way of being? If we have showed that it's necessary for spirituality, it requires helping our friend in chat to understand spiritual experiences. So while he has had, I can tell he's had an experience of this oneness, he needs wisdom, so he needs to perfect his understanding and experience of that. So there needs to be a state beyond it that can look down and help, just as he's not going to do any of this thing unless he addresses his blocks. We need this understanding that can look down to belief. So while you can address people's beliefs in philosophical midwifery from this stage of understanding within wisdom, by using these principles that are non-physical to reflect on their physical imitations, you can use this understanding to perfect your wisdom experience. But, well, or to prepare for the wisdom experience, but there needs to be a higher level. That principle of the higher can help the greater can help the lesser, to help people gain an intelligibility or understanding or development of their wisdom experiences, means there has to be a state of being that's beyond that. Meaning, as you can help the lesser from the state of the greater, you need to be at the ultimate to help the greater. But what we've also seen is you don't lose anything. You still take with you. Our friend says, our friend in chat says, why are you even talking about beliefs and the lesser? It's not real. It doesn't exist. But by having experienced what it's like to go through that, you still take with you your understanding of that realm. It's a version of existence, not real, it's not ultimate existence, it's not even greater existence, it's lesser existence. Therefore, you don't lose what you've gone through. Therefore, the meaning of life has to be a learning and nurturing of our soul that gives us something we can take with us. We don't lose it, otherwise why the fuck would we be here? We have to have something. It would be an unjust or cruel or sadistic universe if we couldn't gain anything by going through our ignorance and learning process. And what we've seen is necessarily for our friend in chat to be open to this kind of reflection on our ultimate goal of the self and how to understand it using the ultimate term and using the three defining categories of the Lego pieces, the ones of goodness, the lesser greater ultimate of truth, the ones of goodness, beauty, justice, whatever, lesser greater ultimate of truth, and the duads of onenesses, and how to uniquely apply these three categories to give the defining title, the one, the true, and the good. For him to be open to it, we needed the skill of philosophical midwifery, understanding applied here. But we also needed a way of being that can look down on his brilliant light of being experience and help him perfect that understanding. But also ask him the questions for... Now, you could say, well, can't understanding help you perfect that brilliant light of being experience? Sure. But there'll come a point where he'll say there's nothing beyond it. So you need a higher state of being that can look down on even wisdom and say, hey, while that was great, and while you learned a lot from that experience, and while it was a demonstration of the ultimate use of language and experience at this level, it ain't the ultimate. Here are some questions. Was there someone experiencing it? Must it have a cause? By the way, for it to be a whole of all parts or a oneness, must there be a principle of the one? For it to be the truth of reality, must there be a principle of true? For it to be a goodness that benefits, must there be a principle of the good? Here are a set of questions that you can only ask in this level of being or understanding to not just perfect wisdom, not just purify ignorance, but to allow people to transcend the greatest experience of wisdom to the ultimate experience of self. Making this new way of being a necessary way of being, the ultimate way of being, and helping us make sense of what Socrates said is, it's a new category of man that dooms all others. But what we saw today is dooms all others in the best fucking possible way. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for our chatter. I hope he had the courage and fortitude and tenacity to not take anything I said personally and stuck with it. And if he did, round of applause for you. Of course, there are some limitations to talking people through Twitch chat. I would never ban you for speaking your mind. Do the opposite. It's not like Beefgate 2025. But yeah, it is challenging. Literally, we saw why it's the most challenging. But I appreciate your company and your interest and you sharing your words and your reflection, especially your reflection on your highest vision. That's what we're here for, to reflect on our highest states of mind or experiences and put words on it the best, but also to be open to the dialectic, to transcend it, to reach our ultimate goal, the self. Thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube. You can follow on Twitch. If you join the Discord, you get notification when we go live. You can also talk to other people, and I write essays on there every now and again, which are mini essays, which are a lot of fun, I think. And you can donate to the channel. There is a link below. You can order the book, and there's even a PDF you can borrow, and there's a link to that below as well. If you do donate, it is greatly appreciated. Wow, what a big one. What a fucking banger today was. Banged hard. We bang hard here. We bang so hard.
Whore much?
Sorry, that was a pretty...
Vapid cunt.
Jesus.
Whore.
Okay. Whoops. I deserve that. That was a filthy joke.
What if a chimp had a cell phone? Who would he call?
I don't know who a chimp would call with a cell phone, but I do know we are going to take this, again, hypothesis. You won't be able to verify that what we have said is true until you reach the ultimate one self. And when you do, I hope you have joined our Discord so you can share your experiences and even share your art of the dialectic to help us move through our development to reach that stage of self. So it's a win-win.
Win-win-win-win-win.
Or a win-win-win-win, because also you're cool. Yes. Win-win-win-win-win. So, likely hypothesis fits with the text. Very curious, very open, very wondering. And again, we can be eager to verify this in our experience of the ultimate self. But the thing is, if we do experience it, we won't not see it. because it has no qualities, or ignore it because we haven't seen what would be valuable about a state without qualities. We can appreciate it with the greatest depth of love, understanding, value, meaning, because we have this dialectical understanding of the ultimate goal of self with us in our back pocket. We don't throw our understanding away with us in the trash, as Pierre Grimes did say. What are you going to do with your understanding? Throw it away in the trash? Of course you bring it with you. Keep it with you. Let's keep our wondering and this hypothesis and our understanding with us as we wander throughout our day until the next one. Thank you so much, and I'll see you then. And then I play the sound. See you in the next one.